Web novels and web novel audiobooks are not the same. If you simply copy and paste a web novel into an audiobook format, the final result will provide a poor listening experience. That's why I carefully revise every single chapter in this novel to ensure an enjoyable and immersive experience for you. I go through multiple rounds of rewriting and listening to make sure the narration flows naturally, almost as if you were reading it out loud yourself. This is not just a direct copy of the original novel. However, I do acknowledge that I adapted this novel for commercial purposes, so most chapters are paid content. I hope you understand that this does not violate copyright policies. The reason I do all of this is simple: I'm just a big fan. As many of you know, I love listening to web novel audiobooks, and this is one of my personal favorites. The audio speed is set to 3, but if that feels too fast, let me know. If there's a novel you'd like me to turn into an audiobook, feel free to suggest it, and I'll do my best to make it happen. Thank you for your support. Ian took a sip of the drink beside him. He really relaxed thoroughly. He soaked up the sea breeze, enjoyed the leisure, and occasionally built sandcastles with Neltlian and took walks along the beach. As night fell, Ian left Sullen Beach and headed towards the Brookers' territory. Pushing through the underbrush, the state of Brookers was far from good. This is bad. Ian. Something feels off. It's dirty and unpleasant. The streets were completely devoid of any signs of life. The stench was overwhelming, and the ground was covered with disgusting, slimy substances. It was during his cautious exploration of the gloomy forests and the eerie atmosphere that it happened. Whoosh! A powerful surge of mana began to envelop the space. The mana orb that exploded in midair wrapped around all of Brookers. It was as if a prison had been formed. Thud. When Ian realized he too was trapped in Brookers, he smirked. It has begun. This was the start of the City of Disaster event. Chapter 56, The Land of Decay, Brookers, 1, What in the world is going on? Ariel's pupils trembled as if she were a trembling aspen. She couldn't understand why such crazy things were happening. We just came for a trip. Why is this happening all of a sudden? Wasn't it supposed to be a healing trip? Ariel wanted to comfort her because Bianca was someone precious to her. Of course, it wasn't solely for Bianca that she had chosen this trip. I just wanted to relax. Ariel herself needed time to recharge. The series of failures starting from the war game had gnawed at her heart, plunging her into self-loathing. Naturally, there are times when one fails in life. What's important is overcoming it. She knew that well. She had faced countless failures and had overcome them all to reach her current position. But for some reason, the feeling of defeat that should have disappeared in a few days lingered. In the end, Ariel couldn't stay in Volkanov. Seeing Ian's face would drive her insane. People might accuse her of running away. She wouldn't deny it. She truly felt she needed rest. I wanted to strengthen my relationships with my friends, too. Celia, who suddenly lost her motivation. Reina, who always smiled but seemed to keep her distance. She didn't know why. The only thing she knew was this: they needed time to come together again. That was why they headed to Brookers. Not only because it was where Bianca lived but also because it's a famous beautiful spot. Brookers, with its warm climate and full of quaint architecture, was often listed as the #1 place to visit before dying. Ariel thought that if they went there, they could surely rebuild their relationships. But what awaited them in Brookers was disaster. What on earth did we see? A ghoul, maybe? If it's a humanoid monster, that's all I can think of. No, Celia. Ghouls might eat humans, but they don't turn bitten people into ghouls. And they looked more like decayed humans than ghouls. A huge explosion was heard, and in an instant, the city turned into a bloody mess. Madmen, crying tears of blood, roamed the streets, devouring living humans. The streets were stained with their fluids and the blood of the victims. They couldn't just stand by and watch, but it wasn't as easy as it sounded. What are we supposed to do? Smack. A madman hit on the head by the hilt of the holy sword Deligen rolled on the ground. Though still writhing as if alive, Ariel couldn't deliver a killing blow. We can't kill them, but we can't just leave them either. What could she do with those who looked like humans? She didn't have an aversion to killing living people. She wasn't boasting, but she had killed countless demons while in the hero's party and even humans targeting her. The problem was that these were innocent humans. Hold on, Ariel. If we hastily kill those who might be treated, it will be hard to manage. But, Bianca. We can't just keep doing this. If they were truly beyond recovery, she wouldn't hesitate, but she couldn't just kill them without knowing for sure. But the problem didn't end there. They're hiding between the buildings, and we can't just keep running. The battlefield was too narrow, unlike before. For them, who had always used wide spaces and overwhelming firepower, this was the worst possible situation. The madness kept spreading, yet they couldn't kill them freely. And the space was too confined. In the end, Bianca had to make a decision. I know. So, We have to stop running away. Stop running? Yes, we need to find out why this is happening and if the madman can be cured. Is there a way to find out, Bianca? Yes, since there are no signs of civilians, we can't just grab and ask them. We need to meet the person in charge of this land. Bianca, answering Celia's question, turned her head to look into the distance. At the end of her gaze was a massive mansion. The mansion our family used before its downfall is now used by Baron Velos, who manages this land. Baron Velos would be in the mansion. If he was responsible for the city, he might know why this disaster started. Then we have no choice but to go there first. You know the way, right? Yes, since I lived here. If we take the shortest route, we can reach the mansion's entrance in less than 5 minutes. Then let's go quickly. The madman might swarm us any moment. With those words, Ariel and her group moved swiftly. Bianca, who had lived here as a child, navigated through the gaps between buildings, forging the shortest path, and the once distant mansion soon loomed before them. Madmen occasionally rushed at them, but unless they came in droves, a few weren't a problem. Just as they entered the garden surrounding the mansion and were about to advance inside, click. What? Watch out. Ariel. Something shot up from beneath Ariel's feet as she crossed the passage leading to the courtyard. Thanks to Celia's quick help, Ariel took a deep breath and looked at the rising object. Is this a wall? It was a solid, wall-like structure. It looked like smoothly cut stone on the outside, but tapping it lightly suggested it wouldn't break easily. She wasn't sure, but it was probably meant to prevent enemies from invading the mansion. Sister Bianca, you could have warned me about this. Ariel, still startled, made a playful remark to lighten the mood. Sister Bianca? But there was no answer. Even looking around, the only ones she saw were Reina, Diaz, and Celia staring at the wall with their mouths agape. That's when Ariel realized. Guys? Are you okay? This is... Sister. Bianca was isolated alone. Sister. I'll break the wall. Stay back. Don't get excited. Ariel. This wall absorbs mana, so it's not easy to break through. But if we attack it multiple times, surely it will. It will break eventually, but it'll make a lot of noise and attract the madmen outside. Ariel, on the verge of striking with the holy sword Delusion, had to concede to Bianca's calm judgment. It was frustrating, but Bianca wasn't wrong. The madmen they had encountered reacted to loud noises. Breaking through this wall would create significant noise, putting both of them at risk. If we fail to break the wall, Bianca will be in danger. Despite Bianca's powerful magic, she was still a mage. Without someone to hold the line, she'd quickly be overwhelmed. But I can't break the wall in one go. What should they do? Leaving Bianca alone was dangerous, but they couldn't break through the wall. Ariel's dilemma was resolved when Bianca spoke up. Listen carefully, Ariel. If you move a bit further inside the courtyard, you'll see the mansion's door. Inside, there's a lobby with a statue. Let's meet there. What about you, sister? I'll be fine. I can reach the lobby through the basement. Wait for me there. But it's dangerous. Entering the basement and meeting in the lobby. It was indeed the best choice given the situation. But Bianca would be in grave danger. The mansion's interior could be compromised, and traversing the narrow basement alone was a risky decision. Understanding Ariel's concern, Bianca smiled to ease the tension. Don't worry. You know I grew up here, right? I've explored every nook and cranny of this place since I was a child, so I know the layout better than anyone. Sister. So, don't worry. Let's meet in the lobby. Got it? Promise you'll survive, and shout if you're in danger. We'll come to save you. With that, Ariel heard the sounds of her companions running on the other side of the wall. Now, she was alone and had to safely reach the lobby. Phew. She steadied her breathing, silencing her footsteps as she approached the basement. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door and slowly entered the basement. And then she saw it. Gra. Kayak. The interior was also overrun by madmen. Ah. Thump. Startled, Bianca stumbled back, accidentally kicking a box. Grr. Gra. The madman's eyes locked onto her. Bianca gripped her staff tightly, drawing magical power into her body. I didn't want to use this. She had hoped to preserve this space, filled with childhood memories. But now, she had no choice. Just as she was about to unleash her magic, whoever you are, come here now. Huh? What? A vent on the ceiling opened, and a hand reached down. The hand beckoned her urgently. Well, it's better than fighting the madman here. Hesitating only for a moment, Bianca grabbed the hand. A powerful grip pulled her up. The enemies appearing in the Brooker's event are resistors and zombies. Creatures that looked like they had crawled out of the ground. Weaker than ghouls but vastly numerous, zombies were simple to handle. You have to smash them before they infect others. That's why, pow. Boom. Grrr. Crunch. Ian Volkanov had no hesitation in smashing the zombies' heads. Of course, they had been human just a few minutes ago, but once they turned into zombies, there was no going back. If reversal was possible, the event wouldn't be called the corrupted domain of Brookers. They were beyond saving. Thus, Ian beat the zombies calmly, though Niltlian, unaware of the details, trembled with fear. Ian, what is this? These things? They're called zombies. Zombies. I know ghouls, but this is new. Zombies and ghouls looked similar at first glance, so the confusion was understandable. But they were distinctly different monsters. Ghouls are human-shaped monsters with a penchant for cannibalism. Zombies are transformed humans. Both shared a blind aggression towards humans. However, the differences were clear. Firstly, zombies can infect others, but ghouls can't. Secondly, ghouls have fully functioning nervous systems, while zombies have lost all senses except hearing. In simple terms, zombies were weaker than ghouls but had a powerful infectious quality. I've never seen such monsters before, Ian. That's not surprising. This is my first time seeing them too. The reason this episode was called the corrupted domain of Brookers was simple. Baron Velos, a brilliant alchemist, awarded the Brookers domain. While experimenting with ghouls to develop a potion to boost knights' morale on the Imperial request, he accidentally created zombies. He succeeded in imbuing a strong desire to kill enemies but at the cost of losing humanity. Baron Velos acknowledged his failure and disposed of the potion, but he couldn't deal with the zombies. So he sealed them and started developing an antidote. But that's when the resistance messed things up. Baron Velos, during the zombie treatment process, restricted entry to his mansion to essential personnel only to minimize accidents. This led to distorted rumors spreading. Rumors claimed that Baron Velos had developed a divine potion granting immense power. Oppressed commoners, especially those with fiery tempers, joined the resistance, craving this power. They believed that if they drank the potion, they'd gain incredible strength and could start a rebellion against the Empire. He thought he could revolt against the Empire. Not that they barged in recklessly. Given the gravity of the situation, they handled it cautiously, which led to the resistance splitting into two factions, the moderate faction, which wanted to gather more information and steal the potion, and the hardliners, who wanted to attack immediately. This event was entirely caused by the hardliners. They coerced former servants of the Velos household to gain access to secret passages and launched a surprise attack. What followed was a nightmare. As you can see, there was no divine potion. The attack unleashed the sealed zombies, turning the city into a wasteland. They claimed they wanted to create a better world and ended up doing this. How could they be so foolish? No, on second thought, their goal might have been somewhat achieved. If their aim was to create a rebellion threatening the Empire, then they succeeded. Of course, they also suffered consequences. I don't feel sorry for them. It's not something I should care about. What happened to the rebellion they incited, or how to deal with the people who turned into zombies, wasn't something he wanted to ponder. There was only one thing to focus on. Saving Ariel and gaining Bianca's favor. That was the only thing he needed to remember. Step. Though he tried to muffle his footsteps, the squelching of wet grass couldn't be hidden. The sound of wet, blood-soaked grass squishing underfoot as he carefully navigated through the devastated landscape. Is this a wall? The entrance to the courtyard was blocked by a wall. After examining the wall for a while, Ian made his assessment. It's blocked. Given the different material, it looks like it's part of a defense system. Judging by its mana-absorbing properties, it wasn't an ordinary wall. It was likely installed to fend off attacks. There aren't many signs of a battle here, so the defense system might have been triggered by Ariel's group. There was more evidence to support this judgment. Ian. Look here. The floor is indented. It does seem like something heavy pressed down here. Between the shoe prints, there were marks as if someone had used a staff to steady themselves. This was likely Bianca's doing. All other footprints end here. This suggests Bianca might have been separated. Where could she have gone? Did she circle around the mansion looking for another entrance? No, that would be too reckless. Bianca, a mage with immense firepower, had the drawback of a frail body. She wouldn't have chosen to fight zombies alone. She would have chosen a safer route to avoid the zombies. Knowing the building's layout, she would have considered using the basement to move safely inside. But Bianca wasn't the only one familiar with the layout. Not to brag, but I've died 40 times in this segment alone. Though he might not have the flashy skills of a seasoned player, his perseverance was unmatched. In the end, he had drawn the building's layout on scrap paper to clear the level. He never forgot those memories. Thanks to that, Bianca would have moved through the basement. He could make a confident decision. There was no other option Bianca would have chosen other than using the basement to enter the building. Having made the decision, there was no need to hesitate. Let's go, Neltlian. Yeah. Next time we meet zombies, can I beat them instead of you? Sure, I'll let you bash them to your heart's content. Chapter 57, The Land of Decay, Brookers, 2. The one who saved Bianca from the zombie horde was an elderly-looking man. The man who introduced himself as a researcher working under Baron Willows. The moment she heard those words, Bianca realized that this was an opportunity. If it's this man, wouldn't he know the secret behind the ruined territory? Although her journey was interrupted, seeing the place that held her childhood memories crumble was something Bianca couldn't accept. It would be best to resolve this if possible. If I do that, I can preserve my memories and help Ariel too. Ariel had been struggling due to repeated failures. If this issue was handled well, it would become a tremendous achievement for her. That's why Bianca listened attentively to Phelps. What did you say? The information he provided was too shocking. What did you just say? You mean to tell me that the humans named Serolda and Vanessa are the ones responsible for this disaster? Bianca's murmur echoed faintly through the vent. Phelps just nodded at her agitated reaction. Yes, you heard correctly. This incident was orchestrated by the resistance, specifically the hardliners led by Serolda. Vanessa, as Serolda's closest confidant, pushed this operation forward. Phelps' story was simple. The madmen they had seen before, the ones referred to as zombies, were failed experiments by Baron Willows. Baron Willows had been doing everything he could to cure them, but the zombies were released due to an attack by the resistance. Phelps had revealed everything to Baron Willows to stop Serolda's insane plan. Even with this shocking revelation, what Bianca reacted most strongly to were the perpetrators. Vanessa. Serolda started to change after getting close to that woman. She became obsessed with the lives of the powerful and began craving power and strength. Do you know her? Of course, she did. Vanessa. She is my sister. We lost contact after our family fell, but I never thought she would be involved in something like this. Vanessa Matip. Bianca did not have a favorable view of her sister. Not only because of her flawed personality, but her ideology was the biggest problem. Vanessa was always obsessed with becoming stronger. To an extreme degree. It was far too intense. Experimenting with newly acquired dark magic by cursing her vassals was the least of it. She would even attempt nonsensical actions, like sacrificing the cat Bianca secretly raised to practice necromancy. Bianca even found an entry in her sister's diary suggesting they sacrifice their youngest sibling, who was suffering from an illness, since she was going to die anyway. Father and mother tried countless times to fix her. Bianca still vividly remembered her parents' efforts to reform her sister. Dark magic had always been shunned, and even when the Matip family was at its peak, they were under suspicion. What happens when the eldest daughter behaves like that? Her parents tried everything, harsh scolding, gentle coaxing, any means they could think of. But the results were never good. There was no sign of improvement. And while our parents were trying, the family fell. In Bianca's memories, Vanessa was nothing but a power-mad lunatic. That's why. What this man is saying could be true. Bianca could believe Phelps' words. At least the Vanessa she remembered was someone who could manipulate the resistance and devastate Brookers for her own strength. With a growing sense of guilt, Bianca lowered her head, and Phelps did the same. This is my mistake. I didn't realize she was your family. No, I should have stopped my sister before she did such things. I don't know what kind of person Vanessa is in your memories, but the Vanessa I saw wouldn't change for anyone, not even for her grandparents. So you shouldn't. Ahem. Blame yourself. Oh, are you hurt? Wait, I know some basic healing magic. No need for treatment. It's already too late. Though dark magic was her forte, the growing hatred towards dark wizards in the Empire led Bianca to learn other types of magic. She had picked up some simple healing spells, so she tried to check Phelps' wounds. Oh. I told you, it's too late. Seeing the blood seeping through his clothes, Bianca fell silent. The darkness had obscured her vision, but Phelps' upper body was drenched in blood. What happened? Don't worry. It wasn't a zombie. I was cut by a sword. That's not the point. Who did this to you? Serolda. Shamefully, my wife. His own wife had stabbed him? It was hard to believe, but the most shocking thing was Phelps' attitude. A wife stabbing her husband. That's unbelievable. I hate to admit it, but my wife is insane. After joining Vanessa, she started dreaming of a life of power. The life of a noble? A noble. That wouldn't satisfy her. Nobles wield tremendous power, but above them stands the supreme imperial family, doesn't it? That was not the life Serolda desired. On the surface, she claims to want to create a country where everyone is equal. But her ambition is likely to become the leader of the nation and place herself at the top. A world without discrimination was the ideal that the resistance had long sought, but Phelps didn't believe it was right. Anyone can speak well in theory, and theoretically, the country the resistance envisioned wasn't bad. But reality is different. No matter how much one cries for equality, leaders always emerge in any group. Would those who have tasted even a little power be willing to give it up? Especially those who have lived under oppression? The resistance would likely seek to claim what they had been denied under the pretense of reward, and the empire would face a crisis because of it. Though Phelps was a commoner, he could distinguish right from wrong. An unprepared revolution only brings chaos. I thought it was my duty to prevent that, so I left the resistance and revealed everything to Baron Willows. But I failed. The resistance pushed their operation beyond our imagination, and the zombies overran the village. That's how I ended up like this. Oh. Don't feel too sorry. At least I managed to put an end to Seralda with my own hands. While he had successfully thwarted Seralda's ambitions, it was too soon to be relieved. Vanessa, the true mastermind, was still at large, meaning the disaster was not yet over. May I ask you a favor? Please stop Vanessa. She never cared about the Resistance's ideals from the beginning. She intends to use the zombies to overthrow the Imperial family. That's... At first glance, it might seem like an exaggeration, but Bianca knew that if it was Vanessa, it was entirely plausible. If it's my sister. Vanessa had been famous for her extraordinary talent in dark magic. If she could control ghouls as she wished, it stood to reason that she could control zombies as well. In the end, Bianca could only nod. I'll do my best. Thank you. Please. With those words, Phelps closed his eyes peacefully. His body slumped, and his breathing stopped. The life he had been holding on to slipped away. Her cherished memories had turned into a zombie-infested nightmare, and the root cause was her own sister. Overwhelmed by shame and guilt, Bianca clenched her teeth. If I had paid more attention, could things have been different? If she hadn't ignored those unpleasant memories and had taken an interest, could she have prevented this ruin? After repeatedly questioning and answering herself countless times, she came to a conclusion. One thing is certain. I must protect the territory of Brokers. The city that held her childhood memories, the only place where she could feel her family's presence. She could not tolerate it being defiled. With her resolution firm, Bianca headed through the ventilation system towards the lobby of the mansion. She moved as quietly as possible to avoid alerting any zombies and, fortunately, made it to the lobby without incident. Upon reaching the lobby, she jumped down from the ceiling vent and saw, Bianca. You're alive. Ariel ran towards her with a beaming smile, accompanied by relieved comrades. And, sister. I have great news. On my way from the courtyard to the lobby, I met someone. Do you know who it was? It was your family. Behind Ariel stood a woman with ash-colored hair. A familiar face to Bianca. Oh my. Bianca, is that you? How many years has it been? Vanessa. It was the moment she came face to face with a true mastermind. Chapter 58, Someone to Rely On. 1. Meeting her again in such a perilous place was a joy, but she couldn't just smile and be at ease. Why on earth is that person with Ariel? The person responsible for so much suffering was with her sister. How they met and became so close was beyond her comprehension. But she knew she had to separate them. Ariel, get behind me. All of you, come here quickly. Bianca, gathering mana in her staff, stepped in front of Ariel to shield her. Ariel, not understanding the sudden battle stance, looked confused. Sister, what's going on? Don't you know using skills here will attract enemies? It's not about what I know, it's about what you don't. Do you even know who that woman is? Who? She's family, isn't she? She is, but she's also the cause of this disaster. Ariel couldn't possibly doubt Vanessa, who wore a gentle smile. Any suspicion would vanish the moment she was introduced as a family member. However, Bianca couldn't stand the sight any longer. Cause of the disaster? That's too harsh, Bianca, especially after all this time. Shut up. You think I don't know what you've done? I heard everything on my way here. Bianca, filled with rage, pressed Vanessa, who remained calm and collected. Are you going to believe everything you hear from one side? You've never been rational since you were little. This isn't surprising. You plan to ruin the Kalos Empire with zombies. Do you think I wouldn't find out? I don't know what you've heard, but that's not true. The resistance unleashed the zombies. I was gathering information to stop them. This land is precious to our family. Enough of your lies. Bianca stopped talking, knowing she couldn't just eliminate Vanessa here. Any commotion would attract zombies, and Vanessa, being a skilled necromancer, wouldn't be easy to deal with. I can't kill her now, but... Her priority was to thwart Vanessa's plans. Just as Bianca was about to lead her comrades to Baron Willows, Ariel intervened. Sister Bianca. Why don't you believe your family? Ariel? What are you talking about? As Ariel grabbed her arm and gazed at her, Bianca was momentarily speechless. Ariel continued. I don't know what you heard on your way here, but shouldn't we trust Vanessa's words? No, Ariel. I met someone who worked under Baron Willows, and they told me everything. Vanessa is behind this. The real culprit is Baron Willows, who created the zombies. How can you trust the words of those who worked under him? They might be blaming others to hide their own wrongdoings. What are you saying? Phelps, the supposed villain, had saved her from being devoured by zombies. Could she doubt someone who risked their life to save her? She looked at Ariel in disbelief, but Ariel stood firm in her resolve. At that moment, Bianca made a realization. You see this as an opportunity. Her inferiority complex towards Ian was eating away at Ariel. The achievements of her brother, who succeeded in everything he touched, filled her with envy. Bianca, having consoled Ariel in her struggles against Ian, knew this well. You don't want Ian to regain his strength because then you'd lose any hope of surpassing him. If Ian, whose sword was his greatest weapon, regained his strength, Ariel's competition with him would become meaningless. Bianca suspected that Ariel's insistence on keeping Vanessa close was to prevent Ian from reclaiming his power. A hero who saved a city from disaster and rescued its citizens. That's the title she wants. At first, it might have been for her own sake, but now, that was far from Ariel's mind. Confirming Bianca's suspicions, Ariel delivered her final verdict. Sister, I think something's wrong with you. With that spark, Bianca's irritation towards Ariel intensified. Despite thinking they were more than friends, Ariel only listened to others, blinded by her ambition. How foolish. How infuriating. She closed her eyes and ears to her disgust and annoyance and walked away. Ariel's voice calling out to her rang from behind her. That was it. Ariel wasn't following her. How far did she run? Bianca had come to the room she had lived in as a child. A place filled with memories and comfort, Bianca found no solace. Instead, she was greeted by an ominous sight. Grr. Kaya. Numerous zombies, their eyes bloodshot and bodies oozing fluids, were staring at her. Horrible monsters crowded the corridor, surrounding her. Monsters that are absolutely terrifying. It was overflowing. I'm sorry. Mr. Phelps. She had vowed to fight, determined to protect, but now it seemed like the end. If only she had known, perhaps it would have been wiser to stay close to Ariel, even if she disliked it. Hic. She felt a deep sadness. She thought she had found true allies after her family fell apart, but now, even those people were gone. There wasn't a single person she could rely on. She felt like she was left all alone in the world. Was it too much to wish for someone to rely on, someone to feel the warmth of family? As she pondered this, watching the approaching zombies, a moment occurred. Why are you crying, sister? Do you want a hug? A little girl with black hair and red eyes appeared before her. The girl, looking about 6 years old, gazed at her with concern. At that moment, Bianca regained her composure. Who are you? This isn't the time for this. It's dangerous. Huh? What is? There's no time to explain. Get behind me. Those things are dangerous. How could this child be here in the midst of all these zombies? Was she a ghost? Was she hallucinating? Regardless, one thing was clear, she couldn't let this child die. As she made up her mind and began to gather her mana, the little girl interrupted. No. Kid. It's dangerous. This time, I promised I'd take care of those things. I won't back down, even for you. Just watch. The girl stepped forward and extended her hand toward the monsters. If one only saw her gesture, it would be hard to understand. But the result was different. Crunch. Crack. Rah. Grr. Following the girl's hand, a giant hand materialized and began to crush the zombies. The captured zombies were squeezed together, turned into blood clots, and fell to the ground. Despite the extraordinary feat she had just performed, the girl turned around and smiled brightly. How was that? I'm amazing, right? I can beat up zombies too. You are amazing. But it's hard to praise reckless behavior. A wave of mixed emotions surged through her. Rationally, she knew she should scold the child for taking such a dangerous risk, but... Come here, let me give you a hug. Okay. How could she scold such a small, precious child? Just seeing her smile and hugging her seemed to heal Bianca's heart. She didn't want to make her feel downcast. As she patted the child's head while she snuggled in her arms, Bianca carefully spoke. How did you get here? Where are your mom and dad? Mom? Dad? They died a long time ago. Oh. I'm sorry. Is there anyone taking care of you now? Yeah. He's really nice and handsome. He talked a lot about sister. About me? Yep. He told me to help the woman with the purple hair if she was in danger. So I came here. Someone had sent this girl to help her? Who could it be? The girl mentioned a woman with purple hair. This wasn't a common hair color, especially not in the Empire. Although the Mage family was known for their ashen hair, she had dyed it an uncommon color to avoid the stigma of being fallen nobles. But in this territory, there shouldn't be anyone like that. Such a rare hair color in the Empire, especially in the territory of Brookers, and even more unlikely within this mansion? Then this girl must be talking about her. Who could it be? Someone who knew about her, spoke about her a lot, and told the girl to protect her in danger. As she was thinking about this, the girl suddenly exclaimed. "Oh. Ian. Over here, over here." "Ian? What did you just say?" The name that came out of the girl's mouth was unexpected. Startled, she turned her head to follow her gaze and saw him. Step. Step. A man was slowly approaching from the end of the corridor. Tears welled up in her eyes from an inexplicable sense of relief. Ian spoke indifferently. "Don't cry. Zombies are coming." It was the moment she found someone she could rely on in this hell. Chapter 59, Someone to Rely On. 2. Bianca didn't like Ian. He was a key figure in the 3rd platoon, a competitor of her own 1st platoon. More importantly, she had been part of Ariel's party. Hearing constant gossip about Ian naturally built a negative perception of him. Of course, that wasn't the end of it. Volkanov. They were the first to withdraw when our family began to decline. She couldn't stand the Volkanov family itself. To put it harshly, she detested them. They abandoned us, even though we were so close. They were the first to cast us aside. The Volkanov family and the Mage family both bore the responsibility of defending the Empire against demons. In the face of a common enemy, the two families united and supported each other without hesitation. Despite being high-ranking nobles, the Volkanovs looked at the Mages, who were ostracized by society for being dark magicians, without prejudice. The relationship progressed rapidly. There were even rumors in their childhood that she might be betrothed to a Volkanov. That's how close their families were, and she initially had a favorable impression of them. However, from the moment her parents turned into demons, the Volkanov's attitude did a complete 180. "I remember everything," she pleaded, claiming there must have been some manipulation, but the powerful nobles ignored her, and the current emperor took a strong stance against demons. As a last hope, she sought the Volkanovs, but all she received were cold responses. They said there would be no cooperation with demons. Bianca's view of the Volkanovs changed from that moment. I truly believed in them. No matter how hard they tried, they were criticized just for using black magic, and the nobles who disintegrated her family seemed to have been waiting for the moment of ruin. Because they knew that they and Volkanov would be different. I believed in them. What she received in return was the sight of her parents being brutally killed by the Volkanov knights. From that point, Bianca closed her heart and developed distrust towards nobles. One could argue that not everyone was like that, but Bianca had experienced countless sturdy people who approached her because of her immense talent and striking appearance. She was convinced. Nobles can't be trusted. That's what she thought until... Why is your face like that? Don't cry. Or the zombies will come. It's nothing. I'm not crying. The issue was the child named Neltlian. Why does this child follow Ian? Bianca thought Ariel was the only decent person among the Volkanovs. Despite her immense status as a hero and the daughter of a frontier count, Ariel didn't discriminate against commoners or fallen nobles. Initially, Bianca thought it was all for show, but after spending a lot of time with Ariel, she realized Ariel was genuinely sincere, and she liked her for that. That meant Bianca had no choice but to be wary of Ian, someone she knew nothing about. But seeing Neltlian genuinely following Ian made her wariness melt away. Children are innocent. They don't have pretense and always act truthfully. Unlike adults who wear the mask of hypocrisy as they age, children express affection straightforwardly. If Ian were truly a good person, a child wouldn't want to be close to him or show him affection. But Neltlian really likes Ian. Even now. Hey, did you know Ian made a lot of money from potatoes last time? Really? Yeah. And he held a martial arts tournament. It was really fun. Do you want to come next time? Sure. I'll look forward to it. Neltlian kept chattering about Ian's virtues, revealing all the unknown details about him. Thanks to that. This is a completely different person from what I knew. I thought he was a cold-hearted, ruthless meritocrat. But he has unexpected sides. Bianca began to think she might be able to trust Ian. Bianca stared blankly at Ian's back as he navigated the mansion with ease. He moves as if he knows every corner. Ian had Neltlian stay with Bianca while he went ahead alone. Although Bianca, who had lived in the mansion, offered to lead the way, Ian told her to stay with Neltlian instead, saying she wouldn't be much help otherwise. It could have been taken as him dismissing her abilities, but Bianca knew better. He just speaks that way, but he doesn't mean it maliciously. He was simply stating the truth. It was better for her to stay put than accidentally set the mansion on fire. Even in that moment, Ian was effortlessly dealing with the zombies, clearing a path as he moved through routes unknown to Bianca, who had spent her childhood in the mansion. She began to think that perhaps Ian was indeed someone special. "We've arrived. Is this the place you were looking for, Ian? What exactly is here?" The person holding the only key to resolving this situation. Ian stopped at a door, surveying his surroundings before decisively opening the sturdy door. And there, they saw him. Who are you?" A man lay sprawled on the floor, gasping for breath. He was Velos Hedon, the notorious alchemist who had created the zombies. "Are you Baron Velos?" They confronted him. Baron Velos was in terrible condition. This is the worst. He seemed to have lost all his strength, unable to even hold himself up, lying there, gasping for air. His eyes were sunken, with dark circles suggesting he hadn't slept in days. Even now, he was struggling to speak. When Ian introduced himself and said they had came to save him, Velos briefly smiled with hope, but it quickly faded. The guilt of destroying his fiefdom crushed his spirit again. However, Bianca saw this as an opportunity. Thud. "Ugh. Are you Baron Velos? What exactly did you create? What the hell did you do to turn brokers into this mess?" she shouted, her voice filled with anguish. She knew Baron Velos hadn't done it on purpose and that the real villain was Vanessa, but he was still the one who created the zombies. If you hadn't created those monsters. Her beautiful city, filled with cherished memories, had turned into a blood-soaked nightmare. This man ruined everything, her vacations, her memories. Whoosh. With one hand gripping his collar and the other summoning mana, she was ready to strike him down. Even without her staff, killing a weakened man like Velos wouldn't be difficult. Just as she was about to throw a punch, Ian stopped her. "Top. Restrain yourself. It's not time to kill him yet." Her fist was caught in Ian's hand. Bianca, her eyes red from tears, looked at him. "Why are you stopping me? You know what he did. If he hadn't made those monsters, your territory wouldn't have been devastated. I understand that. But Baron Velos didn't do this thoughtlessly." Ian acknowledged that Velos was responsible for creating the zombies, monsters arguably more terrifying than ghouls. However, that didn't mean Velos was irredeemable. Baron Velos conducted those experiments not out of personal curiosity, but because of a royal commission. It was an unavoidable accident. An accident? Then he should have handled it properly. If you want to make such claims, it's best to look around first. See for yourself what Velos was doing. Finally calming down, Bianca looked around. Piles of documents detailing experimental results surrounded them. Each one aimed at finding a way to revert the zombified individuals to their original state. And that wasn't all. The room had been thoroughly dismantled. It was built strong for containment, with devices triple secured against any unforeseen accidents. The moment zombies were discovered, Velos sealed them away to focus on developing a cure. He kept it quiet to prevent panic among the masses, Ian thought to himself. Consumed by guilt for creating monsters, Velos isolated himself to focus on research. He knew his reputation would suffer, but he felt responsible and did everything to make amends. Had he truly been obsessed with his reputation, he would have quietly disposed of the zombies immediately after creating them. These test subjects were commoners, they couldn't oppose a noble like him. Even though there were ways to maintain his reputation, Velos chose to uphold human decency. It was something he did with his own hands. He had to fulfill his responsibility. Just knowing this, one couldn't simply label Velos as entirely evil. Remember, Bianca, our anger should be directed at the resistance, not Velos. Don't forget this. Even in these circumstances, it's important to calmly assess who the enemy really is. I understand. Convinced, Bianca fell silent. Ian turned his gaze to Velos, who bowed his head as if in disgrace. Ian asked as he looked at her, lowering her head. Has there been any progress with the cure development? Unfortunately, there hasn't been any significant progress. No progress. Or is it impossible? With a probing question, Velos revealed the truth. I apologize. It seems impossible. Impossible. That's the worst. After discovering zombies, I conducted countless experiments with my researchers. We tried herbs, elixirs, and even considered invoking divine power through priests. Alchemists and priests were typically at odds with each other. If Velos mentioned seeking power from priests, he must have exhausted all possibilities. However, none of it worked. Eventually, I concluded that restoring reason to those turned into zombies is impossible. A potion created to boost knights' morale. Stimulating the brain to control emotions was inevitable. And restoring a damaged brain due to side effects was nearly impossible with current technology. Even though it's in a different institution. The brain is the most important part. Isn't it the most important part of the human body? Even if it's the Pope of the Holy Land that believes that they can revive a brain, it won't be easy for the alchemists to have. Reversing zombies is an impossible situation. But it wasn't completely without a solution. Still, it's not like we've gained nothing. From our efforts so far, we've found a way to deal with the zombies. Is that the answer? Zombies. Unlike ghouls who eat indiscriminately, they are cautious in choosing their prey. That's because fear as a human is still weak in their heads. Helpless ordinary citizens tear them apart, but those with suspected power are not easily confronted. Once we obtain such prey, it is offered to the strongest host available. If the host consumes it without issue, others will soon follow suit and devour it. Do they have such rules among themselves? It's intriguing. How does that relate to their method of disposal? There's one more thing I haven't mentioned. When the host is disposed of, all the zombies in the area lose their lives. They perish. Yes. Regrettably, while attempting to restore them, I inadvertently killed one of the hosts. As a result, all the zombies in the vicinity perished instantly. You can't trust me on this. Are you planning to utilize this behavior for disposal? At Yin's question, Veloz nodded and retrieved a syringe from his pocket. He carefully held the syringe containing red liquid. This is a highly toxic substance I created before. Once injected, it spreads through the body and causes instantaneous death after 10 minutes. The plan was straightforward. You can't be serious. Yes. After administering this to myself, I will become the prey of another host we captured before closing the territory. By using him. Becoming prey for the zombies himself. That is certainly a good plan. If the information he has is true, he can easily handle the zombies. Of course, sacrifices are needed, but Veloz was willing to pay the cost for his guilty conscience. But Yin couldn't just stand and watch. We can't just sit back and watch that plan. There's no other way. This is the only method to minimize damage and handle them. If disposing of the host can kill the zombies, there's no need for you to risk your life. They knew that he tried to remedy the situation. But that doesn't mean he can wash away his guilt. Regardless of how it ends, it will likely end in death. Nevertheless, shouldn't Veloz apologize properly and leave to the residents who suffered from his actions? Ian was not one to tolerate irresponsible behavior. I know of Ian's strength. I witnessed him dealing with the demon Lilith. However, zombies are different. If they attack even once, you too. You don't need to worry about that. It was I who insisted on the plan. Even if it fails, the responsibility lies with me. Faced with Ian's strong insistence, Veloz eventually had to relent. Then let's begin immediately. Where is the host? I have sealed them separately in a room below. Although they are mixed in with the resistance members who turned into zombies, you should be able to distinguish them by the greenish tint on their skin. Got it. Let's move then. They were about to move to handle the zombies when Veloz hesitated and finally spoke out with a sigh. There's something else I haven't mentioned. What is it? After hesitating, Veloz let out another sigh and revealed. We need to lure the zombies into the mansion. Lure them. Is this because of the method of disposing of them through the host? Yes. The area affected by the host's influence. Around this mansion, within Brokers, we need to gather all the zombies here. Is that why you've been holding back on executing the plan? Veloz, who seems to think nothing of death, has already set his mind on moving towards the host. It must be because of this. Even though I tried to use the zombies to my advantage, it would be pointless if I can't handle all of them. Although he had set up defensive walls to protect the outside from being damaged. He didn't know how long it will last. Communication systems have already been paralyzed. I wonder if you will be suspicious of the Imperial family in the near future. Communication with Baron Veloz, who had entrusted with the mission, was cut off. Of course, the Imperial family would judge this to be an abnormal phenomenon and dispatch an investigation team. What would they do if they saw the wall? It's one or the other. Either they try to break through and invade, or they sense something amiss and come prepared with troops to break through. But either way, being able to break through is still a long way off. If some remain and become zombies. If they go outside. The Academy genre game changes into the Apocalypse genre. Could it change to Zombie Academy from Heroic Academy? Even so, it was necessary to prevent anything from happening. Somehow, the people in the territories should be gathered. Fortunately, Brokers is not that big. What should be done? It was a time of thought. What on earth is that? Bianca opened her mouth with a trembling voice. What's going on? Look over there, Ian. Something seems off. Ian glanced to where Bianca pointed, a screen displaying surveillance footage of the estate, monitored through the communication hub. On the screen, a scene unfolded, quang. Bang. Explosions rocked the vicinity of the mansion, caused by Vanessa. They're swarming in. In response to the explosions, zombies surged towards the mansion in a frenzy. Ian smirked. Vanessa. Didn't think your antics would actually do us a favor. At that moment, Vanessa, the culprit behind the current chaos, was luring the zombies towards the mansion. Chapter 60, Someone to Rely On, 3, Hey. This is going more smoothly than I expected. Meeting Ariel must have been a stroke of luck. Vanessa mused with a sly smile. All that's left is to gather the zombies in one place for control. I never thought I'd get help like this. Ariel had believed her words without question and helped gather the zombies. Although Ariel had shown her infinite goodwill, Vanessa suspected there might be hidden motives behind it. Well, she might want to blow up the mansion and take credit for it after gathering the zombies in one place. Vanessa had entirely different intentions than Ariel, who wanted to control the zombies. But she didn't particularly care. The situation was unfolding just as she desired. Breaking through the barriers surrounding the estate was difficult for me alone. Even though she had talent in dark magic, her expertise lay in necromancy, summoning and controlling monsters. Reviving the dead and turning them into her minions granted her immense power, but as a consequence, Vanessa couldn't create a powerful strike. That was why she had gathered the zombies at the mansion. To control as many zombies at once as possible, I had to gather them. And while I was at it, taking care of Velos would be killing two birds with one stone. She could break through the barrier and obtain all the zombies she had long desired. This was the best situation for Vanessa. And Ariel is away from here now. Had Ariel continued to follow her, it would have been troublesome. But thanks to Ariel's companions, Vanessa had bought herself some time. Was her name Reina? I should try to keep that child alive. The fall of the Empire was inevitable, but making Reina the last survivor would be an adequate reward. Well then. Shall we go? With a satisfied look at the zombies swarming in, Vanessa slowly headed inside the mansion. She passed through the garden and courtyard where she had played as a child. Stepping into the lobby where she had once greeted her father returning from expeditions, she felt a wave of nostalgia for the familiar place. However, Vanessa steeled her heart and recalled her plan. The host zombie is supposed to be in the research facility on the second floor, right? The mansion had been entirely remodeled since her time living there, but the structure remained unchanged, making it easy to find the location if she had a rough idea. The research facility. If I remember correctly, it used to be the meditation room. The Matip family, masters of dark magic, had developed various methods to enhance their skills. One of these was meditating in a dark room to communicate with spirits. Given its size and security, it was indeed a suitable place for a research facility. The door to the research facility had already been broken open by the zombies. Passing through the shattered entrance, she saw it. Grrr. Gra. Zombies, easily over 100, were swarming inside. Krr. And among them was a greenish zombie, the host, under her control. Most people would be horrified by the sight, but for Vanessa, it was a magnificent view. As she lifted the corners of her mouth in a sly smile. Thunk. Ouch. What is this? Something strange, a syringe, had stabbed into her arm. The overflowing red liquid rapidly permeated her body. What is this? Just as she was wondering, a voice echoed. You've got some nerve to come here on your own. Who are you? Curious about who I am? A man, Ian Volkanov, swiftly descended from the ceiling, clenching his fist with an indifferent expression. You don't need to know. Watching Vanessa stagger, Ian stifled a laugh. The poison is quite effective. She's already stumbling after such a short time. According to Velos, the poison could kill any living creature within 10 minutes. Given Ian's rapid regeneration, he might withstand it, but for Vanessa, enduring it would be nearly impossible. Originally, I planned to use the poison on the host zombies. Seeing how it's affecting Vanessa, I'm glad I used it on her. Using it on the hosts would make dealing with the zombies easier. That much was certain. Initially, Ian had intended to use the poison on the hosts. However, when Vanessa revealed herself, he had to change his plans. In the original story, Vanessa controls the zombies and poses a significant threat. It's one thing to beat down rampaging zombies, but dealing with controlled ones is much harder. Vanessa Matip, a dark magician with unparalleled talent in necromancy. If not for her flawed personality, she was evaluated to surpass her father as a necromancer soon. Ian recalled how she was portrayed in the original story. It felt like facing a well-trained Night Order rather than a horde of zombies. In the Brookers event, he died 20 out of 40 times fighting her as the boss. Even more frustrating was that in the original, she didn't die here. She escaped and reappeared later, threatening Ariel with skeleton soldiers instead of zombies. He couldn't leave a future threat unchecked if he couldn't eliminate her now. And that wasn't the only reason. It's tough enough to fend off the zombies for 10 minutes. If skeletons join in, there's no answer. Using the poison on the host meant dealing with both zombies and skeletons. Using it on Vanessa meant only facing zombies. That was why he chose to use the poison on Vanessa. Q. Whoever you are, did you think you could ruin my plans and walk away? How about I turn you into a zombie and make you toil forever? GRR. Ian decided to subdue Vanessa first and then deal with the approaching zombies. He had to endure for 10 minutes, but it wasn't an impossible task. Proving his judgment correct, he heard a voice. Neltlian, spread your arms. Yes, Ian. Boom. Crack. The sluggishly moving zombies couldn't react to Ian's punch. If these were zombies directly controlled by Vanessa, they would have easily blocked such an attack. But Vanessa was in a state of severe intoxication from the poison. Even if she wants to make proper decisions and control, the pain will be too much for her to handle. In such a situation, it wasn't easy to counter modern combat techniques, which were difficult to follow even when fully conscious. The implication was simple. Dealing with the zombies is straightforward. Even a monstrous disaster was nothing more than a small fright to Ian at this point. Knowing this, Ian moved even faster. Ho! With concise footwork, his fists shot out fiercely. Avoiding straights and body hooks, he focused on jabs and long hooks in his combinations. Pop. Pop pop. Using the space broadly and focusing on outfighting was advantageous against multiple zombies, and Ian exploited this actively. Of course, he didn't forget about Neltlian. Crunch. GRR. In blind spots, areas out of his line of sight, or when he was vulnerable while throwing punches, he used Neltlian's wings to defend. He avoided destroying the mansion as much as possible, crushing zombies into bloody pulp instead. How much time had passed? Damn it. Where did such a guy come from? Seeing the rapidly dwindling number of zombies and Ian showing no signs of fatigue, Vanessa gritted her teeth. Her arm, where the syringe had been stuck, was numb and devoid of feeling, but she couldn't just stand by. She tried to cast her remaining defensive spells to interfere. Low AIS. Quang. Q. A massive shield appeared around Ian, repelling Vanessa's attacks. What the? This is impregnable. How on earth was she supposed to kill this guy? The zombies' heads burst like overripe melons upon contact with his fists. When they swarmed him, the massive hand materialized behind him would crush them effortlessly. Any attempt at counterattack? It only worsened her situation. It was incomprehensible where such a person had come from. Am I losing? Me? She was hailed as a genius. Even her parents, the most accomplished dark magicians in the Empire's history, recognized her as a prodigy. Objectively speaking, her talents were extraordinary. To handle zombies strengthened by necromancy so effortlessly. Most dark magicians, even the fastest, could summon a skeleton soldier around the age of 13. But her? At 5, while other young girls played with dolls, she played with skeletons. Impossible. I'm a genius. My talents are unparalleled. When she realized this, Vanessa believed her talents were bestowed by the gods to dominate the world. That's why she obsessed over becoming stronger. While others learned etiquette, history, and noble conduct, she carried tactical manuals and focused on training. High society? She had no interest. The Matip family was never welcomed anywhere. Although she could have felt resentment, Vanessa used this as motivation to hone her skills. I've cut off human relationships and devoted myself entirely. She treated the worried retainers indifferently. Rather than wasting time talking to useless people, it was better spent reading tactical manuals. She had lived like this for over 25 years. She pursued strength alone, and even after her family fell, she used that anger to further sharpen her skills. All she looked forward to was the day she could bring down the Empire with her honed skills and create a new world. Who are you? Why are you stopping me? At the sight of the man before her, all her thoughts shattered. She couldn't understand what was happening. Vanessa focused the magic she used to control the zombies into her hands. The mana of the dark attribute wavered intensely. Why are you stopping me? Do you know how hard I've worked, how much I've suffered to get revenge on the Empire? She rushed at Yin in desperation. Low AIS. Boom. In close combat, she was no match for the shield and was sent flying. Watching her struggle to stand, Ian chuckled. Pathetic. Just like a fly. What did you say? You're like a fly buzzing around me. Did you think becoming stronger made you invincible? How unfortunate. The world is vast and filled with people far stronger than you. You. Did you think hiding away and training would turn you into some hidden master? No such luck. The fact that you're lying there proves it. Vanessa's eyes trembled as she saw Ian sneer. Ah. Is this the end? She thought bringing down the Empire with zombies would be easy. But such monsters existed in this world. Then what have I been doing all this time? All those years of honing her skills in dark caves and abandoned ruins. What were they for? Even though she frequented dark rooms as a child, spending years alone was not an easy task. She had many days when she wanted to give up. But Vanessa always steeled herself, believing that overcoming these hardships would lead to a bright future. She thought that if she did what she had to, the heavens would open a path for her. But is the path given to me only failure and ruin? Vanessa clenched her teeth. How can this be? She had lived in pain. How could all that effort vanish meaninglessly? If there were gods, if such beings truly existed, shouldn't they grant a break after giving such trials? She had believed in that steadfastly. Because of that. Pa. She rose stubbornly once more. Running away wasn't an option. As that bastard said, no amount of training would change anything now. Her thoughts were focused elsewhere. Let's see if I'm wrong. Let's find out. She intended to use everything she had honed and refined to kill Ian. That would prove that the path she had walked was not a mistake. Whoosh. Krarg. The zombies screeched as they twisted their bodies grotesquely. Their eyes, shedding bloody tears, began to glow with a sinister purple light. Is she enhancing them? For a moment, he thought that, but Vanessa was preparing something else. Ominous hands emerged from beneath the zombies and began dragging them down. Ian knew exactly what it was. That's a sacrifice. Necromancy's strength lies not only in the ability to use the power of the dead but also in the fact that as the battlefield becomes stronger, so does the practitioner. Of course, summoning without any cost was impossible. To summon a powerful monster, a corresponding sacrifice was necessary. She's planning to use the zombies as sacrifices to summon something. Even though he read her intentions, it was already too late. Swoosh. The sinister hands dragged all the zombies down, and a gate exuding intense energy appeared next to Vanessa. What emerged from the gate was a knight. Clang. Clang. The knight walked out, the sound of its heavy armor clashing reverberating through the air. Chilling eyes, black armor, and a sword imbued with ominous mana. A death knight. It was the moment when the ultimate monster, which only those who have trained necromancy to the extreme could summon, appeared. Vanessa gazed at Ian with blurry eyes, her resolve unbroken. Let's see if you still think I'm like a fly after seeing this. Handle it. Don't you know that recklessly unleashing power will only tighten the noose around your neck? I don't fear death. But I can't stand the thought of not taking you down. You're completely insane. Ian stopped the conversation. She was mad. Nothing he said would reach her now. He needed to focus all his energy on surviving the Death Knight's onslaught in the remaining time. Given that she sacrificed all the zombies to summon it, this wouldn't be easy. I might have to unleash my full power. Just as he was preparing to do his best to kill her. Ping. A thin beam of magical light shot past his head. What? He turned to the source of the light and saw. Bianca? Bianca, holding a staff and panting heavily. She had compressed her magic into a thin, concentrated beam. Ian, you said I couldn't be of help. Do you still think that? Bianca forced a smile, lifting the corners of her mouth. Ian responded with a gentle smile. As for Vanessa, there was no need to look anymore. Off. Q. The swiftly fired magic beam pierced through Vanessa's forehead. The Death Knight began to lose its form and crumble. Vanessa, the main boss of the Brookers event, met her empathetically. As he retracted his power and watched her fall. Tick. Tiding. What? This is. A green orb rolled across the floor, having fallen from the crumbling Death Knight's body. No way. Ian's eyes widened in surprise as he identified it. Chapter 61, Memories of That Day, 1. In Heroic Academy, there were various hidden pieces. Items hidden deliberately by developers or items that could be obtained by meeting special conditions and visiting specific locations. Simply put, they were items that couldn't be acquired through ordinary gameplay. It may not sound like much, but when you actually try, it's no easy task. Finding them takes at least a few days, and there are almost no clues. True to the notion that they couldn't be obtained through typical gameplay, just relentlessly pushing through the main story wouldn't even yield a clue. The same applied to side quests. The only hints could be found in descriptions of junk items or in conversations with NPCs. It's unimaginably terrible. You have to break through those unfriendly secrets just to get one item. Honestly, how many NPCs could there be in one game? Analyzing every single one of their dialogues to find hidden pieces was no easy feat. But even those hidden pieces are nothing compared to achievement items. You can find them if you put in the time and effort. While playing Heroic Academy, Ian had found and knew the locations of most hidden pieces. Of course, part of it was due to using information from veteran players rather than his own effort. But wasn't finding them what mattered? However, there was one item even Ian couldn't obtain until the end. The achievement item that can be acquired from the City of Disaster, Brookers event. That was my only regret, it wasn't that he had no information. Ian knew how to obtain it and what its effects were. But until he cleared the game, Ian couldn't get his hands on that item. The reason? Wasn't it obvious? Why? Because I played it nearly 40 times and died each time. To get the achievement item, one needed to perfectly understand the stage and play as if toying with the enemies. For Ian, who barely managed to clear it, it was a hard feat to accomplish. Of course, if he had the determination to uncover everything in Heroic Academy, it might have been possible. But I wasn't that determined. Hadn't he found the game by sifting through various Academy genre games? Replaying the stage that caused him so much suffering was something he just couldn't bring himself to do. That was why. All I could do was derive satisfaction from the photos veteran players posted in the community. The reason Ian gave up on getting the achievement item in Brookers was that he thought it wasn't meant to be. He believed he would never get it and that deriving satisfaction through others was the end of it. But to see this here. Looking at the green orb in his hand, Ian smiled. He knew well what this item was. Unyielding Will. An item that can be obtained only by clearing the fight with the host without taking a single hit. In the original game, Baron Velos lost his life injecting the host with a syringe, and the enraged host called forth a horde of zombies, which the player had to survive for 10 minutes. It was an event of avoiding or somehow enduring the incoming zombies. At that time, Ian chose an unconventional method. I used a bug. Not an external program, though. He found a spot where zombie attacks hardly reached by coincidence and stayed there. Occasionally, he got hit by the zombies' blind attacks, but it wasn't a problem since he could withstand them by using prepared potions. Though it was an easy clear, he unfortunately didn't get the achievement item. But now it was different. Well, I only beat the zombies without getting hit. Hadn't he one-sidedly beaten them? To make matters worse, Vanessa, cornered, even sacrificed the zombies. The achievement would have been automatically cleared. After finishing his thoughts, Ian looked at the green orb. As far as I know, breaking the orb grants a strong passive resistance to mental attacks. In reality, dealing with zombies in the game often came with minor debuffs like fear. Surviving 10 minutes without taking a single hit meant overcoming all such debuffs, so it wasn't strange to receive such a reward. Anyway, it's good. Resistance to mental attacks isn't easy to come by. It was certainly a satisfactory reward. The reason was evident from why warlocks and shamans were shunned by the world. They weren't shunned because they used abhorrent magic or because they were unjust. It was because they attacked human emotions. Unlike the body, which could be strengthened through training, attacking the mind was not something that could be easily improved no matter how much one trained. That's why warlocks and shamans have been ostracized. It's not just because people find their methods repugnant. It's also because of the fear of their deadly powers. If they grew stronger, they would undoubtedly seize control. So, instead of outright prohibiting them, society made them abandon dark magic and curses themselves. Of course, this may work for humans who must coexist, but it's different for demons. For demons, who could easily deal with humans, there was no way to avoid learning such tactics. Thus, most demons adopted at least one form of mental attack. It's possible to defend against them. Even obtaining a strong resistance effect requires tremendous effort. Facing the demons in the future, this would be an invaluable reward. Ian, having confirmed the reward, lifted his gaze to those on the upper floor. At the same moment, he saw it. Finally done. Really? You did it. Bianca, panting and smiling, and Baron Villos, struggling with his aching body, were there. Ding. Quest completed, you have obtained Unyielding Will. The notification that the City of Disaster, Brookers, was finished. Sister Bianca. Here you are. I was so worried running around recklessly. Oh. Yeah. After the incident, Bianca was finally able to face her companions again. Ariel approached with a bright smile while her companions, relieved, took a moment to catch their breath. However, Bianca paid little attention to Ariel. Are you okay, sister? Are you still upset? I'm sorry. But I had my reasons too. I'm not angry. I'm just tired. Really? Yes. I'd like to rest, so could you leave me alone for a bit? Okay. Bianca distanced herself from Ariel without any particular fuss. While she was hurt, the feeling she had previously, where she smiled just by seeing Ariel, was now replaced with indifference. In the past, just being near Ariel had made her feel secure and not lonely. It's different now. Rather. Because she felt comfortable being with Ian and Neltlian. Though they hadn't known each other for long, the brief time had made her realize that Ariel was not who she had thought she was. I know it's shameless and embarrassing to think this way after being hostile towards Ian just a few days ago. On the other hand, Bianca was also relieved to realize the truth, even if it was late. If I had realized it a bit later, she might have developed a deeper relationship with Ariel. Now, their relationship had evolved slightly from friends, but if she had learned Ariel's true self after crossing boundaries, she might not have been able to endure it. Looking back now, my father's words were never wrong. After the incident, Bianca wandered through the now chaotic mansion and headed towards her father's office. Though it had changed considerably over time, the memories of this place remained unchanged. Entering the room, Bianca touched the lower part of the right wall, lost in thought. I used to get scolded a lot here. If I caused trouble, I would be sent here to stand in the corner. Unlike the shrewd Vanessa, Bianca had a gentle nature. Being gentle could be a compliment, but it could also mean being naive, couldn't it? Her father, a representative of dark magic, knew well how harsh the world could be, and he couldn't leave Bianca to her own devices. He always said that I needed to become more ruthless. I had to build proper human relationships. The nagging of her father, which she had grown tired of, was not unpleasant to Bianca. Thinking about it now, all those words were for my benefit. Even amidst his busy schedule, her father devoted himself to his daughter. That's why she had often followed his advice. Even when she knew he was working, she would visit him unannounced and boast about her progress in dark magic. Every time, her father would sit her next to him and give her light praise. I miss him. Bianca wiped away tears that had started to flow and took out a photograph from her pocket. A photo of her younger self being embraced and smiling by her father. Bianca repeatedly stroked the old, faded photograph and opened her trembling lips. I'm here, Dad. It's been a long time. I've grown a lot, haven't I? I was so young the last time we met. Tears choked her voice, but she held back the sobs and looked around the space where she had spent time with her father. He always used to sit me here and lecture me. To meet good people. To find someone I could rely on in society. That the true value of a person lies in being genuine and unmasked. Looking back now, she wondered if there could be anything more important to say in life. At the same time, she felt ashamed. Despite all the advice she had heard, she had been with Ariel. But now, I've met someone I can rely on. I haven't practiced dark magic much. But I've improved a lot compared to before. Would you like to see? Though her father was already gone and would not see it, who knew? Like the spirits she had communicated with, her father might be watching from somewhere. Bianca gathered her mana. She hadn't used it since the fall of her family, but there was no difficulty. The spell she cast was memory tracking, a magic spell that allowed her to view the past through the eyes of the lingering spirits present in the area. There were more complex spells, but the reason for choosing this one was simple. Maybe I can see Dad. It was also a relief to recover a memory she might have lost forever. Realizing that she had gathered enough mana, Bianca cast the spell. At the same moment, her field of vision shifted. Unlike the present, which had lost its light, the antique decorations and the light from the skylight remained as they were in her memories. It was a moment to dive into nostalgia, but unfortunately, she couldn't. What? What are you talking about? Ian? Why are you? The sight before her made everything else fade away. Ian stood before a man lying on the ground, bloodied, with his sword drawn and a trembling voice. The man lying before him was Dad. Her father, Count Matib. Why? Why was Ian pointing a sword at her father? In that moment of confusion, their voices were heard. Please. End my life. I can't. How could I kill you, Count Matib? You must. It's the only way to save my daughter. I beg you. Please. Her father gasped for breath as he pleaded. Kill me, Ian. Chapter 62, Memories of That Day, 2, to ask for death? What on earth does that mean? I didn't understand at all. She couldn't make sense of it at all. Why was her father lying on the ground, bleeding, and why was Ian holding a sword towards him? Bianca knew that her father had died in his office. The Emperor had ordered a harsh crackdown on demons, and once it was discovered that her father had become one, various night orders had stormed the estate. I knew he had died at the hands of the night orders, but she had never imagined that Ian would be the one to end his life. Why was Ian there? Why was her father begging for death? In her bewilderment, her concentration faltered, and the magic was about to collapse, but she quickly gathered her composure and focused. Meanwhile, their conversation continued. Why did you become a demon? You were always so vigilant against demons and took the lead in exterminating them. Why on earth? If I didn't become a demon by my own will, would you believe me? What? Breathing heavily, her father managed a slight smile at the wary Ian. As you know, I detest demons more than anyone. But it's not because of loyalty to the imperial family, it's because of my own desires. Desires? What do you mean? If I could wipe out our enemies, the demons, then perhaps the disdain for dark mages might lessen a bit. I didn't want to pass on my terrible experiences to my daughter. He had put in relentless effort. He worked so hard that even Killian, a genius and master of effort, would have been shocked. Whenever news of demons surfaced, he would immediately go hunting. He targeted and killed demons across the empire and the entire continent. I achieved a lot. The path I took proved to be correct. The once derided Madeep family had become an esteemed house no one dared to ignore, and he had become a leading figure among dark mages. Was that all? Demons in the region had vanished, and his beloved daughter grew up only reading about demons in books. He thought he was on the right path, doing well, but demons turned out to be more sinister than he had imagined. I received a report about demons appearing recently and acted immediately. I thought it was just a hiding place for the remaining demons since I had wiped out all the demons in the area. Was it not? Completely wrong. What was there were not demons? But Demon King. Count Madeep had encountered a Demon King, specifically the Demon King of Pride, Lucifer. Despite his desperate resistance, the Count was forced to kneel, and by the time he got up, the Demon King had already disappeared. I barely survived and returned to my estate. Perhaps it was a blessing, but it wasn't a victory. I realized my shortcomings and intended to train and challenge again. But I couldn't. He had thought everything was fine. He survived even after encountering the Demon King. However, Lucifer had not done nothing. It was the next day when the disaster began. Could it be? You're right. It was the moment when key figures of our family started turning into demons. What the Count saw upon waking was the sight of people biting their own flesh in resistance to turning into demons. They inflicted self-harm to mentally suppress themselves. Yet, he had an instinct that their struggle wouldn't last long, and Count Madeep acted quickly. Although my wife begged for help, saying she didn't want to become a demon, I thought I had to save my daughters first. So I sent those who had not yet turned into demons out of the estate. When he returned after sending them to safety, he found his wife, dead with a knife in her abdomen. She had committed suicide after resisting as a human until the end. At that moment, I realized I had failed to protect my family. But he couldn't collapse here in vain. Didn't he always remember? He wanted to show his daughter a better world. To achieve that, his becoming a demon couldn't be a hindrance. That's why I asked to be killed. I couldn't hold back Bianca and Vanessa any longer. But they need you, Count. No. It's right that I die. The Emperor has emphasized a harsh response to demons. If I die here, my daughter can avoid suspicion. He had to hide the fact that he had become a demon due to Lucifer's influence. If the Emperor learned of it, his daughters might live under the surveillance of the Imperial Knights until their deaths. That was the reason. So it was you who spread the rumor of becoming a demon on purpose? It sounds foolish, but understand me. It was the best I could do at that moment. The reason he cast aside his accumulated reputation in an instant was. It was regrettable, but for his daughters, it was something he could endure. Ah, father. Bianca wiped away her flowing tears repeatedly. So there was such a hidden reason. She had resented him countless times. Why did he become a demon? What regret led him to make that choice? She once thought naively that if such things hadn't happened, their family would have remained strong and she could have lived a life without envy. But once she knew the hidden truth, she could no longer think that way. To sacrifice himself for me until the end. Her father had sacrificed himself unilaterally. All his efforts and his longing for death were to protect her. How foolish of me not to know that. Had she not turned a blind eye to the truth? She had been ashamed of using dark magic and learned regular magic instead. She had even changed her hair color to hide her identity as a member of the Madeep family. The fact that such actions were taken had made it impossible for Bianca to face her father. Though she wanted to give up everything, Bianca focused her mind once again. It was not the time to stop. So, was it because of this the Volkanov family changed its stance? The betrayal of the family, which had been like a blood alliance, was completely incomprehensible. But looking back now, it wasn't entirely inexplicable. It must have been necessary for him to join in attacking our family. Had Volkanov supported Madeep to the end, he wouldn't have been able to join the orders that raided the family. Since he had to hide the fact that he had no choice but to become a villain even if it meant abandoning his family. It was possible that her father had asked Volkanov to change its stance quickly. If he did that, he would at least be able to receive help from those attacking the family. It wasn't betrayal. Volkanov had to attack Madeep with tears swallowed, reluctantly. Ian's presence was likely due to that reason. I heard it while wandering aimlessly in the past. There was talk of a person from Volkanov who achieved excellent results at a prestigious academy. Though not comparable to Ark Academy. He was a man who broke all records and histories of that place where high-ranking nobles' descendants gathered. She hadn't known it at the time, but it was probably referring to Ian. Since he was such a capable individual, the imperial family must have thought of properly nurturing him and summoned him to suppress the Madeep family. Ian, who participated in suppressing our family, met her father, remembered the alliance as a person from Volkanov, and fulfilled the final request. The person who had killed her father was none other than Ian Volkanov. However, Bianca could not be angry about that fact. Ian had not merely killed her father, by taking his life, He had hidden secrets into history. If it hadn't been for him, I would have lived under the surveillance of the Imperial Knights. She might have lived an even more desperate life than now. Had Count Madip's family held on a little longer, they would have been the subject of gossip among the Empire's people. Not knowing that, she was endlessly grateful. Her father had felt the same way in expressing gratitude. I first saw you when you were a child. Back then, you had the expression of someone who had lost everything in the world. But I never imagined you'd grow up like this. Count. I had even thought of seriously uniting you with Bianca. But now it has become an unattainable thing. Count Madip swallowed, shedding a tear, and spoke. I'm sorry for asking until the end. But can you protect my daughter? Don't worry. I will protect her. Thank you. Thanks to you, I will be able to close my eyes peacefully. The conversation that followed was non-existent. Swish. The moment the Count closed his eyes, a mana enchanted sword moved swiftly, thud. Her father's head rolled on the ground. Pa. Ian was out of breath. How long had he been like that? Ian, holding the device, made contact with someone. I encountered Count Madip in his office. But the capture you mentioned was unsuccessful. The battle was urgent, and there was a mistake. Yes, I will accept the punishment gladly. I'm sorry. I will return immediately. Ian was reporting the situation to his superior. His voice was struggling to hide his emotions. But at least it was visible to Bianca. Yes. I understand. Once again, I'm sorry. Tears flowed uncontrollably. Ian, who stared at the Count with bloodshot eyes for a while, left the room. Bianca, who had realized all the truths, also cried. How? Her gratitude towards her father, who had given up everything to save her. And I'm sorry, Ian. I didn't know such things until now. Ian's dedication to helping her, even though he had a prime opportunity to build his reputation and didn't even know her well. I'm sorry, Ian. Bianca could only cry endlessly. Chapter 63, What are you doing now? 1. It had been several days since the Brookers event was resolved. Isn't vacation supposed to be a time for recharging? Even the brilliant students of Arc Academy took some time to relax during their breaks. But that wasn't the case for me. While others were making travel plans or lounging in their rooms, Ian had been running around dealing with various issues. Before the vacation even began, he was fighting off barbarians. Following that, he dealt with the Archbishop Raymond of Edenria and then the recent zombie incident. Of course, I did take a trip to the beach in between. Ian shook his head. Even if he wanted to rationalize it, he couldn't. He had rested, that was true. He even crossed off one item from his bucket list, relaxing on an empty beach with a drink in hand. But it would be hard to say he had a good rest just because he did that for a few hours. If someone who had been running tirelessly was given a 3-hour break and then told to get back to work, they'd likely grab their collar in frustration. And it's not like I slept comfortably either. I was tangled up with zombies right after. Given how he spent his vacation, he couldn't say it was enjoyable. That's why, I'm going to really rest this time. I won't compromise. He declared a strike and holed up in the Blue Moon Pavilion. He didn't need to do anything special. He just wanted to enjoy the passing clouds and spend his time leisurely. How long had he been doing that? He soon realized, as usual. Damn it. The world never went as he wanted. Waking up to an unexpected guest, Ian put on a disgruntled expression. Ugh. I didn't know there was such a cute and kind dark attribute spirit. If I had known, I would have studied spirit magic harder. Hee hee. Am I cute? You look cute too, big sister. I can't help it. Neltlian. Do you want to live with me? That won't do. I like you, but I like Ian more. How about you live with Ian? Huh? Me with Ian? I'd like to, but... What am I saying? When had she even come to the Blue Moon Pavilion? In the adjacent room, Bianca was holding Neltlian in her arms. Watching them through the crack in the door, Ian let out a wry laugh. This is a bigger deal than I thought. It wasn't unusual for her to visit the Blue Moon Pavilion. After all, she had received help in the Brookers' territory. She often visited from his room at the nearby inn. Fine, I'll concede that Bianca has memories of this place and wants to protect it. But what about the others? She wasn't the only one visiting. Reina also came by often, bringing desserts made from winter straw baileys. Were they the only ones? Of course not. Next were Leah and Eri. The constant visits were disturbing his rest. Finally reaching a state of enlightenment, Ian decided to end his strike. It's not a bad situation, though. Upon reflection, wasn't this what he had always wanted? It was he who had decided to draw in the heroines to attract Leviathan. Getting attention from the heroines was undeniably a good situation. The family is running well. His retainers were working efficiently, and the second tournament ended successfully. Despite not intervening beyond healing the participants with super regeneration, there had been no issues. It means I don't have to be obsessed with the family. The time wasted on cleaning up was over. The once unstable family atmosphere had been settled, and there hadn't been many people visiting for work recently. With investments starting earnestly, the retainers wouldn't need to ask for help. Is it time to begin? Finally, Ian could take a breath, knowing it was time to hunt demons. At this moment, there was only one thing left to do. Mock battles. Preparing for battle against demons by honing his skills, that's all it was. As soon as he activated the mock battle, Alex Volkanov appeared before him, sword in hand. Fight fair and square. Seeing him charge forward with a protective shield, Ian Volkanov couldn't help but lift the corners of his mouth. Ether. In the past, before the possession. To support his struggling family during a difficult period, Ian had jumped into hard labor. There was something he often heard from the adults back then. Hey, kid. Why are you so scrawny and yet working on a construction site? He was supposed to be enjoying coffee with friends under cherry blossom trees on a college campus, but instead, he found himself in a perilous, dust-filled environment. In hindsight, it wasn't so strange. Of course, Ian hadn't wanted to be there. He wanted to drink and have fun at college. But what could he do when circumstances didn't allow it? When he shared his family troubles, amidst heavy dust and disinfecting his throat with pork belly and soju, the older men would pat him on the back and laugh heartily. You've got a good heart, kid. But do you know how fast time flies? Being filial is good, but at your age, you should have some fun. Otherwise, you'll regret it later. Time flies. They said he'd regret spending his youth like that. Ian had heard it countless times, but he couldn't empathize. Feels like time is running backward. For someone who had led a tough life, he had never experienced time flying by. Now, he finally understood what they meant. Is it already the first day of school? Don't lie. I've only had a few mock battles and played with Neltlian. How has a month passed? As the morning sunlight heralded the start of the school term, Ian couldn't help but feel a bit disheartened. But what could he do? The calendar didn't lie. He had no choice but to suppress his sadness and put on his well-pressed cadet uniform. His first days after the possession, where he had walked to the academy feeling lonely, flashed through his mind. But now, things were different. It's been a while, squad commander. The last time I saw you was a week ago. I think a week is still a long time. True, Eri has always been with Ian. As soon as he arrived at the capital, Eri and Leah were there to greet him. Of course, they weren't the only ones around. But why are those two behind you? Eri's sharp gaze turned to the two women standing awkwardly behind Ian. Reina and Bianca. I live on the outskirts of Ashland, so it costs a lot to get to the capital. I asked the senior for help. But why is Bianca here? Shouldn't you be with Ariel and Trishora? Why should I be in Trishora? Besides, Ashland isn't so bad. It's warm for the north. Normally, they'd be eager to stay close to Ariel, but now they seemed anxious to cling to Ian. Since she didn't know, she couldn't help but look at it strangely. Eri looked at him, expecting an explanation. What should I say? There wasn't much he could say. I can't exactly tell her it's to isolate Ariel. He couldn't explain that it was necessary to draw in demons. Suggesting we travel separately to ease Eri's mind. That might work, but it would undo all his previous efforts. He couldn't make such a foolish choice. Instead, he decided to let things be. All right. Let's move quickly then. Fortunately, Eri seemed to decide not to pursue the matter further. Swoosh. Eri and Leah took positions on either side of him, while Bianca and Reina followed closely behind. Watching them, Ian smiled to himself. Yeah. The situation is good. At the beginning of his possession, the heroines had despised him. Compared to that, this was a huge improvement. It's much worse than expected, but at least the plan succeeded. From what he heard, even Celia spent her vacation cooped up at her family's estate. A vaguely planned scheme had came to fruition, and Ian had nothing to complain about. Suppressing a chuckle, Ian entered the auditorium and glanced around. Familiar faces came into view at once. There were the squad members, including Igor, the platoon commanders, and a surprised Haley. But Ian didn't pay them much attention. There was only one place his eyes needed to be. There she is. Unlike before, when she stood on the podium looking down at the students, she now stood huddled among the first platoon members. There you are, Ariel. Seeing his lonely sister, Ian smiled. It had been a well-meaning plan for a trip. Bianca had lost her family at a young age and had to leave her hometown. Whenever she had free time, she missed her family. Ariel had done her best to comfort her during these breaks. We used to spend time together at the estate. And meet Reina if we got bored. How much time had passed? Recently, They had decided to visit the Brooker's estate directly. Ariel thought that facing the past with someone by Bianca's side would give her courage. I never imagined zombies would appear. But I thought it was an opportunity. Despite the unfortunate event, she saw it as a chance. Driving out such vile creatures from a place full of memories would strengthen their bond and restore Ariel's cracked reputation by earning the title of hero who saved the estate. However, the outcome was entirely unexpected. I understand I hurt her. I admit I was wrong. But still. Ariel looked at her device, disheartened. No matter how many times she tried to contact Bianca, her messages remained unread. When they finally met, Bianca looked visibly disappointed and didn't return to Trishula, instead leaving for an unknown destination. Ariel was growing distant from Bianca. But Ariel's trials didn't end there. Why is everyone unreachable? What's going on? Even Reina, who had seemed unsettled during the trip to Brooker's, had cut off contact. Celia said she was feeling down lately and wanted to rest a bit. In the end, Ariel had to spend her vacation alone. A leader who had always been surrounded by people was now by herself. At the start of the vacation, she thought it was just a temporary thing. She believed time would solve everything. It was a miscalculation. On the first day of school. And still no contact? Neither Bianca nor Reina had replied, and Ariel had to go to school alone. Isn't that Ariel? Where are the kids she always hangs out with? Maybe she ditched them after the poor performance at the war game? Hey. She can hear you. Be careful. I wasn't bad-mouthing Ariel, just that commoner and fallen noble. She tried her best to avoid the gaze of those who were whispering and walked while covering her ears. Standing among the first platoon members, waiting blankly, she suddenly saw them. Why are they? Bianca and Reina were with Ian. Why were they following Ian and smiling when they had been so hostile toward him before? Nothing made sense. Did they ignore my messages and spend time with Ian? When had they become so close? Why hadn't they told her anything? Just then, a bizarre voice echoed in her head. Aren't you angry? Another hallucination. Since returning from Brooker's, she had been tormented by strange auditory hallucinations. At first, Ariel hadn't paid much attention to the disturbing voices in her head. She had thought it was just a reaction to seeing the frightening zombies, like when you can't shake the feeling of being watched or can't go into dark places after encountering something terrifying. She assumed that, over time, the disturbing sensations would naturally fade away. However, as the hallucinations persisted beyond a week, Ariel couldn't ignore them any longer. Aren't you angry that your friends were taken away? There must be a reason. There must be. So shut up. She had tried to get a diagnosis from the priests, used earplugs, and even sought her master's help for a magical cure, but nothing changed. The voices continued. What is going on? What is this? Don't you want to kill Ian? He took everything from you. Even when she covered her ears, the echoing hallucinations drove her to the brink of madness. The only thing that seemed to help her hold on was tightly gripping the holy sword. Ha. For reasons unknown, holding on to the sword was the only time she felt she could endure. Of course, it wasn't that the voices were completely gone. The volume was just turned down, barely. It was still 100 times better than the blaring voices that had been tormenting her. How long had she kept her head down? The principal's speech marking the end of the vacation had concluded, and the screen began to display the students' matchups. Now, we will begin the intergrade exchange matches. The intergrade exchange matches were designed to assess the students' skills and prevent them from losing their edge after the vacation. It was a simple duel to see how well they had addressed areas of improvement suggested by their instructors. While it might seem like just another practice match, there was one key difference: the matchups were not chosen by the students but assigned by the professors. Where am I? Holding her throbbing head, Ariel squinted at the screen. Just as she was scanning from the top, she saw it. Second year 3rd platoon, Ian Volkanov. First year 1st platoon, Diaz, eh? She realized that it wasn't her but someone else who would face Ian. Diaz is fighting Ian instead of me? Her eyes widened in confusion. Honestly, she had expected to be the one matched against Ian. After all, there was no one else in the first year who could compete with him. It was common for top students to face students from the higher year, but this year's 3rd year students were described as the worst in history. On the other hand, the 1st Street year students were hailed as the best cohort ever. Ariel had been sure that the professors would pick someone from the first year to face Ian, and she had been convinced that it would be her. Even though I lost in the war game, in a simple duel, in a match with minimal strategy, she had thought she'd get another chance. But that wasn't the case. Then who was she matched up with? As she looked around in a panic, she found the answer. First year 1st platoon, Ariel Volkanov. Second year 3rd platoon, Igor Pendia, Igor. He was the one who had been with Ian, the man who had destroyed the 1st platoon's plans by tearing through their rear during the war game. He was her opponent. The realization hit her. Hey, you're Ariel Volkanov, aren't you? As she looked up, she saw the enormous figure covered in tattoos and scars towering over her. Igor Pentia. The moment she faced him was now. Chapter 64, What are you doing now? 2, Is my opponent Diaz? Ian Volkanov narrowed his eyes as he looked at the matchup chart. He had once defeated Diaz in a previous battle, but he knew better than to underestimate him. Of course, Diaz is a disciple of Hexer Magiclin. Hexer Magiclin. The man who turned the small guild he inherited from his father into one of the most renowned in the Kalos Empire. A legendary figure who manipulated every guild in the empire like puppets. People often referred to him as the Mercenary King, but Yin knew him by a different name. The ruler of the wilderness. An outcast of the Great Forest, who, alongside Illy and Sigurd, swept through enemies at the vanguard of the heroes' party. This was Diaz's master. That was why. I can't underestimate him. Ian anticipated a fierce battle. Not that he was scared. Unless he faced Hexer himself, his chances of defeat were slim. Even if Hexer personally intervened, Ian was confident he could win. Ian had another reason for his caution. Hexer only pursues victory in battles. He doesn't care if the process is beautiful. Knowing this, it was obvious how Diaz, taught by such a master, would approach the fight. Diaz would use every possible trick to secure victory against Ian. Diaz might seem like a scumbag if I put it this way, but what can I say? That's how he's shown himself. Even though disciples can choose different paths from their masters. Ian doubted it considering Diaz's actions in the war game against Leah. Normal people would try to induce Leah's surrender or send her off with minimal pain. But what had Diaz done? He had charged with an axe, eyes filled with bloodlust, barely concealing his combative nature. It was not an exaggeration to say he was a product of his master's teachings. Though there's still a considerable gap between Hexer and him. In any case, the important point was simple. Diaz would stop at nothing for victory, so Ian's goal was to win the battle without getting hurt. Thanks to this thought, Ian was prepared. Swoosh. Hup. I knew it. Ian was able to counter Diaz's charge the moment the battle began. Ian caught Diaz's swiftly extended axe and looked at him with cold eyes. Thud. A drop of blood fell to the ground, a cut appearing on Ian's cheek from the recent attack. At a glance, it seemed like Diaz aimed for his face, but anyone with combat experience would know what Diaz was truly targeting. He was aiming for my eyes. Diaz used a weapon with a spear tip on the end of his axe, thrusting it towards Ian's eyes, an attack no decent person would attempt. But Diaz felt no guilt. The reason? Obvious. That's how he was taught. That's how he survived. A commoner and a hunter's son, Diaz learned to kill beasts while other kids learned farming. Hexer likely honed that savage instinct. But it seems he didn't learn it perfectly. At least Hexer had some limits. While Hexer stopped at nothing to win, he never used such methods in practice duels, reserving them only for enemies threatening his comrades. Perhaps he didn't teach Diaz that part. Hexer, always on the move, couldn't continuously mentor Diaz. Ian felt a surge of annoyance but held back. He couldn't care less about a comrade's disciple acting outrageously. If he doesn't know manners, he could be taught through pain. And I have just the method. Seeing Diaz struggle to retrieve his axe, Ian smirked. There was a debate once. What if a North Korean Special Forces soldier fought an MMA fighter to the death? It might sound like a trivial question, but surprisingly, the results were neck and neck. Surprisingly, the result was a close match. North Korean Special Forces learn many techniques for killing, so they'd be different in a fight. Real combat is different from professional fights, they said. It might sound plausible. The idea of killing techniques heavily influenced the expected outcomes. But Yin thought differently. From the moment he heard that argument, he was certain of the result. A professional fighter would always win. No matter how skilled a Special Forces soldier is, they can't beat a pro. The reason was simple. Killing techniques aren't anything special. What is a killing technique? It's a method designed to cause death. Mixed martial artists are experts in this area. MMA fighters constantly think about how to inflict more pain, how to break bones easily. Do you think they don't know how to kill someone? Anyone but a fool would know. Even ordinary people understand. A basic jiu-jitsu chokehold can be deadly if maintained. In boxing, a strike to the back of the head can be fatal. They know all this. They just follow the rules in professional matches for safety. The implication was clear. Ian, trained in both boxing and jiu-jitsu, could easily employ these advanced lethal techniques. And he was about to demonstrate it. If you're doing this, you must be prepared to take a beating. No. My axe. As Ian tightened his grip, Diaz's axe was wrenched free. Diaz concentrated his strength to resist, but what the? Such power. In an instant, The axe was torn from his grasp and sent flying across the ground. Daius froze. What's this? If nothing else, he prided himself on his strength. He'd often defeated not just first years but also second years. He thought this would be a fair fight. But the outcome was far worse than he expected. The unexpected turn of events left Daius momentarily paralyzed, both mentally and physically. Ian didn't miss that split-second opportunity. Hup. Swoosh. Ian ducked and dashed to the left. Daius assumed Ian would target his body or head, so he raised his guard and enveloped his torso with mana. With this, even if Ian's punch connected, Daius could withstand it. He could then counterattack effectively. Daius allowed himself a brief smile, but... What are you doing? Smack. Ugh. He screamed as a punch struck him from an unexpected angle. What just happened? He thought Ian would aim for his face or body. He was completely wrong. Ian's target was just below the back of the ear. A rabbit punch, a forbidden boxing technique that could cause paralysis or even death, landed perfectly. Ugh. His ears buzzed painfully, and his vision blurred. He couldn't make sense of what was happening. He began to see multiple versions of Ian's fists. Thud. Thud. Ian's punches hammered Daius's body before he could raise his guard. One misjudgment led to a complete disadvantage. Still, Daius refused to give up. He wouldn't accept such a powerless defeat. He took deep breaths, focusing on recovery. Even though he had lost his axe and his planned attack had failed, it didn't matter. He wasn't out of tricks yet. I didn't slack off during the break. Realizing his shortcomings from the Brooker's event, Daius had devoted himself to rigorous training. Daius couldn't bear to tarnish the name of his master, known as the ruler of the wilderness. He recalled the teachings he received, enduring blood and sweat. Knowing how precious that time was, Daius could never give up. Let's finish this with the technique my master taught me. Daius adjusted his stance. He had learned more than just how to wield an axe from his master. Without an axe and with the enemy also unarmed, this is the best technique. Turning heaven and earth upside down, heaven and earth reversal, a close combat technique taught by Hexer Magiclan. It involved rushing into the opponent's arms and flipping them over. You can't take this lightly. The moment they hit the ground, they'll be knocked out. It wasn't an easy move to counter. Even Ian would be caught off guard by this unexpected technique. Master said only one person on this continent could defend against it. He likely meant the Demon King. In other words, Ian couldn't prepare for this attack. Boom. Daius kicked off the ground, focusing mana into his lower body, and launched himself with formidable speed. As he rapidly closed the distance, Daius smiled. He couldn't react. He had heard that Ian managed to block Haley's charge during practical combat training, but now it seemed his worries were unfounded. In this situation, Ian had no counter. Now he just needed to grab and spin. As Daius reached out, ready to execute the technique, what? His outstretched hand grabbed nothing. What? Why is there nothing where it should be? Confused, Daius turned his head. Crunch. Ugh. A sudden arm wrapped around his neck, tightening like a vice. Guillotine choke, a technique perfect against a charging opponent, and Daius was caught in it. No. My vision. Breathing became impossible, and his neck felt like it was about to break. But the most dangerous part was the darkness creeping into his vision. Without sight, he had no chance. Desperately, Daius abandoned his stable stance and began to struggle. You're making a mistake. What? The guillotine choke wasn't Ian's final move. He had a specific reason for initiating the choke despite having other options. Hup. Gah. With a smirk, Ian leaned back, shifting his choking arm towards Daius's abdomen. Daius, having released his stable stance to struggle, found himself airborne. Ah. It's over. The ceiling and floor swapped places. No, he was being flipped upside down. The combination of the rabbit punch and the guillotine choke culminated in one final technique. Suplex. Arguably the most powerful technique in grappling, if not all of martial arts, had taken effect. Chapter 65, What are you doing now? 3, Helpless. Thud. Ugh. Thud thud. Cuck. As he was pummeled and screamed in pain, Daius harbored this thought. There was nothing he could do. What should I do? Despite his initial boldness, driven by the idea that he needed to attempt an unexpected attack due to the significant gap in their strength, his plans fell apart as he was slammed into the ground. In the midst of his confusion, Ian quickly climbed on top of him and began throwing punches. Losing the upper position and being on the receiving end of blows was the worst possible situation. Of course, it wasn't that there was no way to deal with it. He could try to move his legs as close to his hips as possible and then use a sudden jerking motion to escape. He knew it. The problem was, he couldn't put it into practice. Damn it. My bones. With his body in no state to make such a move, what was he supposed to do? He couldn't even move his legs right now. Ugh! His body was screaming in agony. It felt as if it was begging for mercy. It wasn't just a feeling. Even while he was getting beaten, Diaz looked at his crushed arm. It's broken. It's definitely not just cracked but turned to powder. Although the injury wasn't visible on the surface, his arm was gradually swelling up. He knew better than anyone what condition his body was in. Thus, he was certain. There's no solution. It's over. It's over. There was no longer a way to defeat Tien. Wasn't it said that even if the possibility was slim, there was no result of 0%? Why isn't it possible? It's right here. If there was someone who said such a thing, he wanted to run up to them and punch them in the face immediately. How could one win against this monster? Of course, he had recklessly charged in without fear. But now he knew for sure. He realized the gap was so vast that it was beyond the realm of competition. Just one punch from this person made him question why he had fled from a demon king. Feeling the overwhelming disparity, Diaz could no longer continue the duel. Please. Stop. Just stop. Only after his pleas in a very polite tone did the relentless punches finally cease. Stop. Student Ian Volkanov, step back as well. Only after the instructor's intervention did Diaz finally release the breath he had been holding. The murmurs of the crowd struck his ears. The first platoon, with downcast faces, and the second and third platoons, smirking as if they were pleased with the outcome. It was over. He had been defeated terribly, so mockery was inevitable. They'll probably say something about me being a commoner. They would likely be arrogant. He expected as much. He might even hear similar taunts. Under normal circumstances, he would have raised his arm to cover his eyes from such gazes, unable to face them. But Diaz was different now. I don't even know. He didn't want to be dragged down by their lowly gazes. Even if they laughed at his bloodied and swollen face, it didn't matter. His mind was too preoccupied with reflecting on the battle that had just occurred. Master. You said you were the strongest in the hero party. You mentioned that only one person in this continent could stop this. If that's the case, then why isn't it so? He was confident that even his master would lose to Ian. Instead of saying such absurd things, why not just tell me not to challenge Ian Volkanov? If he met his master later, he would have to vent his frustrations. Thinking this, Diaz exhaled. Complete defeat. As always, he hadn't adapted to losing. When helping his father with a hunt and facing a great bear, he thought he had talent when he won. His belief solidified as he learned from Hexer. He thought there was no rival in his age group and that even nobles couldn't easily match his skills when he showed good performance in practical tests at Arc Academy. He had only faced defeat twice in his life. The first was in a duel with his master, and the other was against Ian. So now it's 3 times. I thought I could win. In the end, he was defeated. But unlike before, he didn't feel despondent. Still, it feels refreshing. Thinking that he was a strong man of a different level, he didn't even feel regretful. The moment he was being pummeled, Diaz realized it was the end. At that instant, he could accept the result with relief. I can't win. Absolutely not. He was facing an insurmountable wall. Splash. Po. Ian. Does it hurt a lot? It's fine. It's just a slight bruise. But it's bleeding. A little blood is nothing. I'll just heal it up. After calming the fidgety Neltlian, Ian shifted his gaze to the mirror. After rinsing off the flowing water, he checked the visible wounds. They weren't major. Even upon closer inspection, it was just a small puncture. Of course, there could be a scar, but it wasn't something worth worrying about. In a duel, minor injuries are to be expected. Scars don't matter. If one were holed up in a room doing paperwork or had a profession that involved standing in front of people, it might be a concern. But if that wasn't the case, a scar on the face wasn't a big deal. In a positive light, it could even be seen as a mark of honor. However, Neltlian's concern stemmed from another issue. It was dangerous. If it had been just a little higher, it could have been a big problem. That I can't deny. The point where Diaz's spear had struck was just below his eye. If it hadn't been blocked in time, the spear would have driven into his eye, potentially causing a horrific outcome. It was only natural for Neltlian to react this way. His anger over a wound that wouldn't even leave a trace if he used super regeneration was understandable. Come here, I'll give you a hug. Okay. As Neltlian waddled over and nestled into his embrace, Ian smiled. He understood her anger. For her, it would seem strange to remain passive after such an ordeal. However, Ian wasn't particularly concerned. After all, I've already avenged myself against Diaz. Hadn't he made sure to repay the damage to the eye? He had endured various techniques and was thoroughly beaten in the end, rendering him unable to move for a while. That had already satisfied his need for retribution, and the advantages didn't stop there. With Diaz's outburst, The situation actually improved. Whether or not Leviathan bit Ariel was still unknown. Thus, Ian had to use all means to isolate her. First, I've taken all the heroines. The problem was Diaz. Trying to win his favor by rubbing up to him wasn't Ian's style. He would have preferred to run straight to Astalgia and bring Leviathan here instead. It was troubling. With Diaz still around, I was worried Leviathan might hesitate. And so, Diaz had created the situation for him. Anyone who could read the battle would know that Diaz had messed up his manners. The first platoon wouldn't be able to cover for this. At the same time, there would be those who would hold Ariel accountable. Though she had no fault, Ariel had already lost her credibility due to her disastrous performance in the war game. She would likely be seething with anger over her ruined results and would probably lash out now. They'll criticize her, saying she's not managing her party members well. Is it right for a hero to carry such a person? At that moment, Ariel would be completely isolated. Not only would the heroines turn against her, but even the first platoon members who had been considered allies would turn their backs on her. This was the solution to a difficult situation. This was why Ian couldn't hate Diaz. Well, this is even better. Now I just have to wait until the bait is taken. As he was about to step out of the bathroom after setting aside Neltlian's true form, he was confronted with Reina? Senior. The moment he saw her, tear-streaked and waiting, he wondered why she was like that. Was she crying because her childhood friend had been beaten so badly? What should he say? Should he apologize first? Ian thought about this, but it seemed unnecessary. Thunk. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Senior. Reina immediately rushed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Ian Volkanov. At first, Reina didn't think well of him. I thought he was a bad person. It might have been rationalization, but the nobles she had seen were all unsavory. She thought Ian was no different from the arrogant and indulgent ones, and naturally, she had no inclination to like him. At least he seemed like that when I heard Ariel talk about him. She believed that Ian was the perpetrator of the pain she had always harbored and hated him for it. However, Reina did not hate Ian once she realized that it was all a misunderstanding. That was the reason. Please win, Senior. The reason she fervently wished for Ian's victory, instead of her childhood friends, was, though she had no doubt that Ian wouldn't lose, wouldn't it be great if he displayed an overwhelmingly dominant performance? It might turn the skepticism of those who doubted him into admiration. She had been enjoying the pleasant fantasy while watching the duel, but her expression hardened soon after it began. What is he doing? Does Diaz have any sense? Diaz initiated the attack against Ian. That part wasn't bad. The problem was with the manner of the attack. He tried to stab the eye with a spear. It was a despicable and deliberate attack, evident to anyone watching. It wasn't a fight to the death or a duel, such a horrendous foul play was unacceptable. If he had stabbed just a little higher, Senior's eye. To think of such an attack that could cause blindness, was that even acceptable? Ian was the eldest son of a count, not just any count, but a frontier count. No matter how much Arc Academy preached equality among students, it was inconceivable for a commoner to commit such a foul against the eldest son of a prestigious family. What should I do? She was terrified. She couldn't bear the thought of Ian truly becoming enraged. It didn't matter if her childhood friend was counterattacked. Though they had shared childhood memories, the moment she saw that attack, any affection she had as a friend had long disappeared. What terrified her was the thought that Ian might lose interest in the village. Thanks to Senior's interest and help, the village is somewhat recovering. If he loses interest, the village would revert to its previous state, potentially returning to a life of poverty and suffering. What Diaz did was that dangerous. That was why she ran out to find Ian after the duel. I have to apologize. Reina believed that asking for forgiveness from someone who would be furious was the right thing to do. What should she say? Was it best to start with an apology? As she sorted through the words in her mind, she found herself staring at Ian's bewildered face. Without any further thought, her body moved on its own. Reina? Senior. When she saw Ian's embarrassed face, her mind seemed to go blank. In the end, her body jumped out first. Thump. I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry, Senior. Her tears flowed endlessly. She knew this wasn't the right time for tears and that she should be apologizing, but she couldn't find the words. What do I do about the wound? It was a small injury, but seeing the cut just below his eye made her mind go blank. Ian, unfazed, embraced her as she fidgeted. I don't know what's going on. She wasn't sure why she was crying. Maybe it was because she hated seeing Diaz being beaten or because the sight of Ian's injury was too painful for her. However, given the situation, it seemed more likely to be the latter. If she really hated it, she would have slapped him or at least yelled. That wasn't the case, was it? It seemed unlikely that this was the reason for her distress. Once she came to this realization, There was only one thing left to do. As she clung to him, sobbing, Ian calmly said, "Don't worry about it. Nothing you're concerned about will happen." Though there was no miracle to stop Reina's tears, he offered his shoulder to comfort her. "What are you doing?" A familiar voice came from behind them. Turning around, Ian saw Ariel? "Tell me. What are you doing right now?" His younger sister, whose face was covered in wounds, was looking at him with murderous eyes. Chapter 66, This was unexpected. 1. The atmosphere in the first platoon was far from cheerful following Daya's crushing defeat. Even if it was just a practice match to assess skills, it was still a face-off between platoons. Given that the traditional rivals, the 1st and 3rd platoons, were pitted against each other, it was natural for the excitement to run high. Both sides had brought out their most powerful hands, so to speak. The students of the 1st platoon had hoped for a good match, even if they couldn't be certain of victory. What did I just see? I got my hopes up for nothing. What was that? What unfolded before their eyes was a disastrous match. Of course, Ian Volkanov was not at fault. He had demonstrated incredible prowess and tactical acumen. The problem was Diaz. No one expected Diaz to be so thoroughly outmatched, even if his opponent was Ian, the top-ranked second year. Diaz couldn't land a single proper attack. But didn't he roll on the ground and try all sorts of things? Ian didn't seem all that impressive either. Some still tried to belittle Ian amidst the disappointment. "Aren't you a magician? What are you talking about? If Ian doesn't seem impressive to you, it's because you don't understand combat. If you knew even a little, you'd realize how high his level is. Is he really that good?" "Yes." Diaz even resorted to sneaky attacks he shouldn't have, but Ian blocked them and won. "That's way more impressive." As if to confirm that sentiment, even Haley, who specialized in practical combat techniques, was left with her mouth agape. At that moment, no one could find any fault with Ian. All that remained was disdain for Diaz's underhanded tactics. "This is bad." Ariel frowned as she listened to the murmurs around her. The situation was dire. It wasn't just that their party member, Diaz, was the subject of ridicule. The biggest issue was that instead of using this to boost their morale, they were left admiring the opponent. Admiring him only lowers our team's morale. We need a reversal. We need to make Ian's performance look like nothing. It wasn't easy to overshadow Ian, who had recently captured everyone's attention. But Ariel wasn't too worried. The next match was bound to be just as spectacular. "It's me. And Igor Pendia, right? The hero of the 1st platoon against Ian's right-hand man of the 3rd platoon." Ariel was determined to claim victory there. It wasn't just about rivalries. It's not over immersion. For me, this is survival. Losing her standing among people was a nightmare scenario for her as a hero. She needed an overwhelming victory no matter what. With that desperate resolve, she stepped into the arena. Thud. Ha ha ha. Easy, so easy. Whether you're a hero or not, if you get hit, you can't move. Did I lose? The result was a crushing defeat. And even as she lay sprawled on the ground, Ariel couldn't comprehend what had just happened. How? She hadn't been careless. She had steeled herself with determination, so how could she have been careless? She had faced the fight earnestly, but Igor was an unexpectedly formidable foe. Some might argue that Ariel's attacks were designed more for wide-area impacts rather than a duel, but at least she knew. I was outmatched. This fight had been lost purely due to a difference in skill. Following Igor's movements was a challenge from the start. Igor, moving like Ian, had shown a level of growth incomparable to their previous encounters during the war game. His astonishing speed disrupted all the tactics she had planned. I tried to create distance for a range attack. Igor's insane speed and toughness overcame the reach difference. Like the zombies in Brookers, Igor kept pressing in even after being hit, throwing punches relentlessly. Focusing on her face and abdomen, Igor's attacks left Ariel unable to defend herself. That was the end. With every punch that landed, her consciousness faded. When she came to, she saw herself lying on the ground, with Igor laughing heartily. Utterly defeated, Ariel could only grit her teeth and return to her place. "Ariel. You fought well, but he was strong." "Yeah, but the opponent was Igor, right? I heard from a friend in the 2nd platoon that he's known as a monster in vision. You can always do better next time." Although her platoon members tried to console the dejected Ariel, she could see through their words. "Don't pity me. You don't really want to either." She could see the hidden smirks behind their words. They seemed to relish in the downfall of Ariel, who had been so proudly walking around as a hero. There was no one to support her. Celia had lost her spirit and stayed silent. Bianca had been out of touch since the Brookers incident. Reina? She was nowhere to be found. Feeling troubled, Ariel decided to wash her face, hoping to clear her mind of these thoughts. It felt like she would go mad otherwise. She walked with her head bowed low. As she neared the restroom, Ariel raised her head. What? She saw it. Don't worry about it. Nothing you're concerned about will happen. Senior. It was her friend, crying in Ian's arms. What on earth was going on? Why was Reina crying in Ian's arms? Why? They had been close. Not as long as she had been with Celia, but still. Reina and Ariel, both first years, had spent a lot of time together. They were close enough to be called best friends. They had shared their innermost thoughts and had grown closer than anyone else. You shouldn't be doing this. Not you. Even if everyone else abandoned her, she had believed Reina would stay by her side. Ariel had extended a hand when no one else recognized her value and dismissed her as a commoner. After all I did for you. And yet, there Reina was, in Ian's arms. What infuriated Ariel even more was the look on Reina's face, one she had never seen before. I gave you everything. But not for Reina? In that moment, Ariel felt like she was about to lose her mind. I don't understand. Not anymore. She had lost everything. She was isolated. It felt like being trapped on a deserted island with nothing. She felt her heart shattering, and the tormenting voices in her head grew louder. Unable to hold back, Ariel screamed out in frustration. Tell me. What are you doing right now? Ah. I never thought this chance would come. Watching Ariel's twisted expression, Leviathan felt a surge of excitement. It was an exhilarating moment. She could hardly believe it was real. How long had she waited? A perfect opportunity to deal with both the hero and Ian at once. For Leviathan, a demon king, Ariel was a particularly annoying existence. If a moment to eliminate her came, she had to seize it. Though it wasn't easy. I failed so many times, almost gave up. But who would have thought this moment would come? The hero was practically the Empire's treasure. What did that mean? It meant the wretched Empire never left her alone, no matter where she went. They had forces stationed everywhere to provide immediate support in case of any conflict, so no matter how many demons Leviathan unleashed, there were always limits. Thus, she had long given up on assassinating Ariel. But this opportunity was too good to miss. To think that Ariel Volkanov would be isolated. Abandoned by her comrades, she was alone, and Leviathan had not overlooked that. Finally sensing that the aura of jealousy was starting to consume Ariel, Leviathan couldn't hold back her triumphant shout. Ho ho! The hero is finished now. Defeating the hero was a significant victory. But Leviathan's joy stemmed from more than that. If I've gained control of this body, Ian Volkanov is next. This was her chance to deal with Ian Volkanov, an even greater threat than the hero. Leviathan knew. What kind of being was Ian Volkanov to the demons? A moment has come to deal with a monster who seemed impossible to defeat. In truth, while the hero was the greatest adversary for a demon king, Ian Volkanov was in a league of his own. Every member of the hero's party was formidable, but the fact that all the demon kings, except for Belfdor, spoke of Ian Volkanov's danger was telling. Such an extraordinary monster was he that some even suggested it would be wiser to deal with Ian before the hero. Wrath. Pride. What did they say? To wait? That I couldn't solve it by acting now? They were wrong. I was right. Leviathan had been lying in wait precisely for this reason. Though she wanted to descend immediately and kill Ian, attacking alone while the other demon kings were cautious would be reckless. She had waited with gritted teeth, even when it felt unbearable and when she doubted another chance might come, she held back her anger. Perhaps the demon god had taken pity on her patience. At this moment, a perfect opportunity presented itself. The preparation is complete. Leviathan was special. Unlike other demon kings who faced limitations when intervening in the middle world, she had no such restrictions. Of course, the price was that she had to possess someone consumed by jealousy, and could only use the abilities of the possessed. But what better host than the hero herself? The sheer force that could sweep away armies just by swinging a sword. I've yearned for it. Even watching from afar drove her mad with envy. The burning jealousy fueled her desire to possess Ariel's power at any cost. This alone was incredible, but Ariel's body had another advantage. Ian Volkanov. Could you really attack your own sister? Even with his reputation as a ruthless demon hunter and the cold-blooded rumors about him, could Ian attack his family? Leviathan thought it impossible. Thanks to this advantage. In the moment of hesitation. If I could possess Ian's body as well. Then dealing with both Ian and Ariel simultaneously would no longer be a dream. At that moment, Leviathan revealed herself. Whoosh! A storm of dark energy surrounded Ariel. When the magic that seemed to suck everything up was gathered, Ian could see it. She's here. He saw Ariel with her eyes clouded, control over her own body usurped. An emergency quest has occurred, a Lord of the Abyss has descended. Stop her, reward for success, third secret, failure, eternal death, Leviathan had descended. Senior. What's happening right now? Reina trembled as she saw the change in Ariel. It wasn't a surprising reaction, anyone could see that Ariel had been consumed by dark energy. Especially since she was the hero, it was even harder to understand. But Yin remained calm and gently pushed Reina away. He surveyed the area. The dark energy emanating from Ariel was forming a circle. Planning to trap the space. Huh? What do you mean? I'll explain later. For now, you need to get out of here. It's dangerous to stay. Though the dark energy was quickly spreading, it hadn't completely sealed the space yet. There was still a moment's opportunity to escape. Though the auditorium is still filled with students, Ian decided not to worry about them. Leviathan's target wasn't the students. If she has possessed Ariel and is trying to trap us, it means she intended to take lives here and now. Otherwise, she wouldn't have chosen this moment to descend. And the instructors are inside. Most instructors had left after the opening ceremony, but those overseeing the duels remained and would protect the cadets. Right now, saving Reina is the priority. It would be troublesome if she insisted on staying to help. Okay. Be careful, senior. Reina nodded without a word and quickly moved away. She understood that she wouldn't be of much help in the current situation. Only after watching Reina disappear from sight did Ian lock eyes with Ariel. Or rather, what used to be Ariel. It couldn't be considered normal for her to be emanating a level of dark energy that made his skin crawl. Ether. A formless energy enveloped his arm, causing a slight smirk to form on Leviathan's lips. Coming right in, are we? She thought so and began to prepare her steps. Whoosh. What is this? Dark energy shot out from both sides. The attack came swiftly without any preparatory movements, reaching him before he could even deploy low AIs. Could Ariel ever use such an attack? It was a mistake. He had expected her to charge with her sword or use a slashing attack to gauge him. This unexpected move caught him off guard. Dodging is impossible. I'll have to endure it with regeneration. He braced himself, biting down hard. Swoosh. Huh? Despite the overwhelming force, the dark energy dissipated into thin air upon contact. There were no wounds, no pain. What? It wasn't an attack? He briefly wondered if it was a diversion for a physical strike and turned to look around. What? Why isn't it working? But Leviathan seemed just as surprised. She was flustered, clearly unprepared for this outcome. What had she tried to do? Just then, a notification rang. Ding. You resist the mind control with unyielding will. The achievement item obtained from Brookers finally proved its worth. So that's what it was. Everything started to make sense. She must have thought I'd be thrown off by facing Ariel. That I'd hesitate and not be able to act properly. In a situation where the opponent's mental state had already been shaken, most would press their advantage. But Leviathan took it a step further. Her goal wasn't just Ariel. She was targeting me as well. It might seem like excessive greed, but the reward would be enormous if successful. Given her passionate nature, Leviathan probably deemed the high-risk, high-reward endeavor worth it. Ian, however, had been prepared, never intending to hesitate in a fight against Ariel. Leviathan had managed the situation well until now. But she hadn't anticipated Ian's trump card. Due to the effect of unyielding will, you gain strong resistance against mental attacks for 24 hours, cool down, 72 hours. As the green energy spread through his body, Ian allowed himself a slight smile. From what I know, Leviathan specializes in mental attacks. If that was blocked, there was nothing left to fear. Chapter 67. This was unexpected, too. The unyielding will obtained from Brookers. It was undoubtedly a good item, but Yin sometimes wondered if it was worth the trouble to acquire it. After all, it was an achievement item. An item with bizarre performance as a hidden piece. Even the Neltlian Ian used was a hidden piece, wasn't it? Compared to its firepower, which could devour demon kings, the unyielding will didn't seem particularly valuable. So, I passed on the achievement item from Brooker's territory without hesitation. However, as the game progressed, and specifically when he started confronting demon kings like Asmodeus, Ian regretted that decision immensely. I didn't realize how crucial mental strength was. In most RPG games, there are only 2 stats you need to manage to clear them, health and mana. But in Heroic Academy, they added another stat, mental strength. I thought it was just a way to slow down content consumption. Entering a dungeon or progressing the story would gradually decrease the character's mental strength. Once it hit the limit, the character would be unable to do anything without resting. The importance of managing mental strength didn't end there. From Chapter 4, monsters start to drain your mental strength. If it falls below a certain level, characters start experiencing hallucinations, and the chance of attacks missing increases exponentially. It was the developer's way of increasing the difficulty. And there are 2 specialists in this area. The first is Asmodeus, the demon king of lust, and the second is Leviathan. Both might be somewhat weak in physical strength but excelled in battles by draining the character's mental strength. If other demon kings fought with brute force, these two relied on finesse. If the opponent is strong, you train and become stronger. That's the conventional wisdom, isn't it? But these two were different. If the opponent was strong, they would weaken them and fight. The implication was simple. Using technique is over. I'll show you what the difference in class is. Once the best card of mental attack is torn apart, Ian would stand overwhelmingly superior. It was because of this. Crash. Ugh. Is that all you can do with a hero's body? It's hard to believe you're a demon king. You. Are you done talking? I am. But I haven't finished throwing punches. Gah. Ian could seize the momentum against Leviathan, who had consumed the hero's body. Seeing Leviathan glaring at him, Ian smiled and immediately delivered a long hook. Bang. Arg. A punch landed squarely on the face. Even as Leviathan took a heavy beating, she seemed unable to understand the current situation. Your head must be hurting. Wondering why mental domination isn't working. And how a brother can beat up his sister so easily. No matter how strained their relationship, they were still family. Attacking a blood relative, even for a cold-hearted person, would naturally cause hesitation. Leviathan probably thought she had the upper hand because of this. She must have assumed that Ian wouldn't be able to show his true power if he faced Ariel, and planned to exploit that gap. But doesn't it hurt to hit Ariel? No, it's fun every time. It feels new every time. At least, Ian didn't fall into that category. Ariel? She was precious. Even when playing the original game, he had tried his hardest to keep her alive. But isn't surviving the priority? No matter how much it hurt to hit a beloved character, he didn't want to die. Leviathan, panting heavily and occasionally touching her cheek, seemed to be in considerable pain. It was clear she was cornered. But Ian couldn't relax just yet. I have to capture Leviathan without killing Ariel. Beating up an annoying sibling was fine, but killing a hero was not an option. Not only was she the Empire's hope, but also the only key to killing the demon god. What should I do? Killing her was something he could do at any moment. But doing so would incur a great loss. He needed a way to deal with just Leviathan. At that moment, it happened. Ugh! Leviathan screamed and gripped Elysian tightly. The holy sword that had emitted blinding holy power from Ariel's hand was now radiating only dark energy. Is she preparing an attack? Judging by the looks of it, she's even draining her life force to do it. Moreover, the walls of dark energy enclosing the area were gradually shrinking. She intended to make it impossible to escape by creating a confined space. If Leviathan's dark energy combines with Elysian's holy power, what would happen? In a split second of simulation, Ian made his decision. It's dangerous. Very much so. I'm already weak against the holy sword because of its dark attribute, and if demonic energy is added to that. If he couldn't block that attack, Ian might die here before even facing the demon god. She's resolved. She doesn't seem to have any intention of backing down. Seeing Leviathan preparing a powerful attack at the expense of her own life force, it was clear she was ready to fight to the death. Even if Ian somehow managed to block the attack, she would likely launch another one. What should I do? Even if I miraculously get past this attack, can I prepare for the next one? And I can't kill Ariel. Ian was sweating nervously in the face of the imminent danger. Wait a moment. The holy sword? His eyes widened in realization. The holy sword Elysian, the greatest treasure of the Empire that eradicated evil and protected the good. A weapon that had saved him countless times from enemies while playing Heroic Academy. His past experiences remained vividly in his memory. That's why he realized it. There was that method. He found a way to overcome the situation. In fact, Ariel is not that strong. Saying that the Empire's treasure and the future hero who would defeat the demon god was weak might sound hard to understand, but it was true. To be precise, her inherent strength is top tier. However, her skill level isn't considered superior. Objectively, Ariel's skills weren't particularly outstanding. Frankly, weren't there people in the Empire with greater strength than Ariel? Ilian Sigurd, the heretic of the Great Forest, had lived for hundreds of years mastering archery and dagger techniques, reaching a level no one could match at present. Hexer Magiclan, ruler of the wilderness. He was an axe specialist who could decapitate a mob of demons in an instant if given an axe. Moreover, there were many strong people outside the hero party. There are many people stronger than those in the hero's party, like Duke Bernagia, the King of Fists, and Duke Wignoron, the Dragon's Lair. Even Ariel's father, Kilan Volkanov, was among them. Compared to their abilities, Ariel's level was frankly subpar. If she were truly exceptional, she wouldn't have needed swordsmanship lessons from an expert like Haley. However, there was a reason the Empire couldn't ignore Ariel despite her mediocrity. That's because of the holy sword, Elysian. Of the 5 attributes in Heroic Academy, the holy attribute allowed only the righteous to wield its power, and in the hands of a hero, it became a tremendously powerful weapon. Ariel isn't strong. But when you're dealing with demons, the story is completely different. The reason Ariel, who objectively didn't have outstanding skills, was able to become a warrior was Elysian exerts tremendous power when dealing with demons or those with the dark attribute. For example, those blessed by the Holy Sword are not only free from restrictions when they set foot in Astalgia, the realm of the demon god, but also receive a buff that doubles their skills. Ian knew well how exceptional Elysian was. The scene where Ariel, a top-level expert, wiped out the demons and cut down a demon king. I still can't forget it. Because it was such a powerful weapon, he conducted many experiments. How could he use this weapon effectively? Was there a way to draw out even more power from it? The results were often disappointing. But he did learn something valuable. I had a question while reading Elysian's description. It said, a sword that destroys the evil and protects the good. Most would overlook such phrases, but Ian did not. He judged that there must be something hidden, and he had time to spare. He decided to test it. It wasn't a grand experiment. I just stabbed. He turned the sword, meant to pierce enemies, onto allies. At first, the results were not good. Was it alien? I stabbed him and he died instantly. Because of that, I was expelled from the hero's party and captured by the knights, leading to a bad ending. If he had stopped there, it would have been a fruitless endeavor. But Yin persisted. He kept stabbing everyone he saw and faced numerous bad endings. So much so that the demons began to suspect that the hero was actually a spy sent by the demon god. Perhaps his persistence was rewarded because, after many attempts, he discovered something new. Stabbing Saintess Glendia made me realize that the Holy Sword has no harmful effect on those with the holy attribute. When he pierced Saintess Glendia of Edinria, there was no wound. What did she say? It's a violent method, but it seems to restore my fatigue. The Holy Sword actually healed Glendia. It was a new realization about Elysian's hidden effect. Ian never forgot this newfound knowledge. If you learn something, you use it. The moment to apply that principle was now. Neltlian. Yes. Ian, now enveloped in divine power, took a deep breath and launched himself forward. He didn't manifest Heavenly Hand as he had when facing Beelzebub. There was no need to cause such destruction in the Grand Hall. The use of divine power isn't limited to Heavenly Hand. Manifesting Heavenly Hand was merely for bombing the area. Other methods were also possible. Among them, Ian chose to focus. He concentrated the divine power in his right hand. With a combination of Ether and Neltlian's divine power, Ian's right hand displayed extreme strength. Crack. GRRK. Boom. What is this? Ah. Not only did he withstand the demonic energy-enhanced strike of Elysian, but he also shattered it completely. Leviathan was flung back in shock. While others might have mocked their enemy, Ian was different. Swish. What speed? Surprised? It's too early for that. Ian only delved deeper into Leviathan's disrupted form. Bang. Boom. His punches landed in rapid succession. The demonic energy surrounding Ariel started to crack with each hit, and Leviathan, unable to bear it, tried to raise her sword in defense. Crunch. Got you? But Yin wouldn't allow any such antics. Using ether, he materialized a hand to firmly grasp the blade, continuing his assault. Leviathan grimaced, and Yin, grabbing her neck while she was groggy, extended his arm and lifted her into the air. Clang. GRRK. Elysian fell from her hand, and unable to breathe due to Ian's grip, Leviathan, despite the dire situation, smiled slyly. Gotten crazy after a few hits? Think what you want. Ian Volkanov. I suffer no damage in this state. Even with possession, if the host is attacked, isn't the damage inevitable? Ian's calm question wasn't wrong. However, Leviathan's laughter wasn't without reason. You figured that out? But did you know? To kill me, you have to end this child's life. Ariel's life? Yes. You won't do it. No matter how much you want to kill me, you won't kill your sister. Ian faced a dilemma. If he killed Ariel and Leviathan together, his life would end there. Without defeating the demon gods, eternal death awaited him. If he chose to save both, all his efforts would be in vain. Now. Choose, Ian Volkanov. Forced into making a choice, Ian did nothing. To be precise, he saw no need to act. Talking nonsense. What did you say? There are no negotiations with demons. That's my principle. He intended to save Ariel and kill Leviathan. That was why he orchestrated this situation. He hadn't endured all this to be swayed by Leviathan's words. Kill me? How exactly do you plan to do that? In possession, the only way to kill her was to eliminate the host, resulting in mutual destruction. If not, there was no way. What was he thinking to act so confidently? Leviathan wondered, but her curiosity didn't last long. You don't mean. In that moment, she saw it. Sizzle. Huff. Ian picked up the holy sword from the ground. Though his hand was burning from the sword's hatred, Ian didn't care and merely smirked. You wouldn't know this. Leviathan. The holy sword, a weapon that only those born with the holy attribute could wield, chosen by it. Those unworthy couldn't hold it, and even if they forced it, immense pain would follow. How? How can you wield the holy sword? The sword was already in Ian's hand. Leviathan, panicking, tried to end the possession quickly, but Ian was faster. Stab. Arg. After grabbing Leviathan, Ian immediately thrusted the holy sword into Ariel's body. Chapter 68. This was unexpected, too. After all, it was an achievement item. An item with bizarre performance as a hidden piece. Even the Neltlian Ian used was a hidden piece, wasn't it? Compared to its firepower, which could devour demon kings, the unyielding will didn't seem particularly valuable. So, I passed on the achievement item from Brooker's territory without hesitation. However, as the game progressed, and specifically when he started confronting demon kings like Asmodeus, Ian regretted that decision immensely. I didn't realize how crucial mental strength was. In most RPG games, there are only 2 stats you need to manage to clear them, health and mana. But in Heroic Academy, they added another stat, mental strength. I thought it was just a way to slow down content consumption. Entering a dungeon or progressing the story would gradually decrease the character's mental strength. Once it hit the limit, the character would be unable to do anything without resting. The importance of managing mental strength didn't end there. From Chapter 4, monsters start to drain your mental strength. If it falls below a certain level, characters start experiencing hallucinations, and the chance of attacks missing increases exponentially. It was the developer's way of increasing the difficulty. And there are 2 specialists in this area. The first is Asmodeus, the demon king of lust, and the second is Leviathan. Both might be somewhat weak in physical strength but excelled in battles by draining the character's mental strength. If other demon kings fought with brute force, these 2 relied on finesse. If the opponent is strong, you train and become stronger. That's the conventional wisdom, isn't it? But these 2 were different. If the opponent was strong, they would weaken them and fight. The implication was simple. Using technique is over. I'll show you what the difference in class is. Once the best card of mental attack is torn apart, Ian would stand overwhelmingly superior. It was because of this. Crash. Ugh. Is that all you can do with a hero's body? It's hard to believe you're a demon king. You. Are you done talking? I am. But I haven't finished throwing punches. Gah. Ian could seize the momentum against Leviathan, who had consumed the hero's body. Seeing Leviathan glaring at him, Ian smiled and immediately delivered a long hook. Bang. Arg. A punch landed squarely on the face. Even as Leviathan took a heavy beating, she seemed unable to understand the current situation. Your head must be hurting. Wondering why mental domination isn't working. And how a brother can beat up his sister so easily. No matter how strained their relationship, they were still family. Attacking a blood relative, even for a cold-hearted person, would naturally cause hesitation. Leviathan probably thought she had the upper hand because of this. She must have assumed that Ian wouldn't be able to show his true power if he faced Ariel, and planned to exploit that gap. But doesn't it hurt to hit Ariel? No, it's fun every time. It feels new every time. At least, Ian didn't fall into that category. Ariel? She was precious. Even when playing the original game, he had tried his hardest to keep her alive. But isn't surviving the priority? No matter how much it hurt to hit a beloved character, he didn't want to die. Leviathan, panting heavily and occasionally touching her cheek, seemed to be in considerable pain. It was clear she was cornered. But Ian couldn't relax just yet. I have to capture Leviathan without killing Ariel. Beating up an annoying sibling was fine, but killing a hero was not an option. Not only was she the Empire's hope, but also the only key to killing the demon god. What should I do? Killing her was something he could do at any moment. But doing so would incur a great loss. He needed a way to deal with just Leviathan. At that moment, it happened. Ugh! Leviathan screamed and gripped Elysian tightly. The holy sword that had emitted blinding holy power from Ariel's hand was now radiating only dark energy. Is she preparing an attack? Judging by the looks of it, she's even draining her life force to do it. Moreover, the walls of dark energy enclosing the area were gradually shrinking. She intended to make it impossible to escape by creating a confined space. If Leviathan's dark energy combines with Elysian's holy power, what would happen? In a split second of simulation, Ian made his decision. It's dangerous. Very much so. I'm already weak against the holy sword because of its dark attribute, And if demonic energy is added to that. If he couldn't block that attack, Ian might die here before even facing the demon god. She's resolved. She doesn't seem to have any intention of backing down. Seeing Leviathan preparing a powerful attack at the expense of her own life force, it was clear she was ready to fight to the death. Even if Ian somehow managed to block the attack, she would likely launch another one. What should I do? Even if I miraculously get past this attack, can I prepare for the next one? And I can't kill Ariel. Ian was sweating nervously in the face of the imminent danger. Wait a moment. The Holy Sword? His eyes widened in realization. The Holy Sword Elysian, the greatest treasure of the Empire that eradicated evil and protected the good. A weapon that had saved him countless times from enemies while playing Heroic Academy. His past experiences remained vividly in his memory. That's why he realized it. There was that method. He found a way to overcome the situation. In fact, Ariel is not that strong. Saying that the Empire's treasure and the future hero who would defeat the demon god was weak might sound hard to understand, but it was true. To be precise, her inherent strength is top tier. However, her skill level isn't considered superior. Objectively, Ariel's skills weren't particularly outstanding. Frankly, weren't there people in the Empire with greater strength than Ariel? Ilian Sigurd, the heretic of the Great Forest, had lived for hundreds of years mastering archery and dagger techniques, reaching a level no one could match at present. Hexer Magiclan, ruler of the wilderness. He was an axe specialist who could decapitate a mob of demons in an instant if given an axe. Moreover, there were many strong people outside the hero party. There are many people stronger than those in the hero's party, like Duke Bernagia, the King of Fists, and Duke Wignoron, the Dragon's Lair. Even Ariel's father, Kilin Volkanov, was among them. Compared to their abilities, Ariel's level was frankly subpar. If she were truly exceptional, she wouldn't have needed swordsmanship lessons from an expert like Haley. However, there was a reason the Empire couldn't ignore Ariel despite her mediocrity. That's because of the Holy Sword, Elysian. Of the 5 attributes in Heroic Academy, the Holy Attribute allowed only the righteous to wield its power, and in the hands of a hero, it became a tremendously powerful weapon. Ariel isn't strong. But when you're dealing with demons, the story is completely different. The reason Ariel, who objectively didn't have outstanding skills, was able to become a warrior was. Elysian exerts tremendous power when dealing with demons or those with the dark attribute. For example, those blessed by the Holy Sword are not only free from restrictions when they set foot in Astilgia, the realm of the demon god, but also receive a buff that doubles their skills. Ian knew well how exceptional Elysian was. The scene where Ariel, a top-level expert, wiped out the demons and cut down a demon king. I still can't forget it. Because it was such a powerful weapon, he conducted many experiments. How could he use this weapon effectively? Was there a way to draw out even more power from it? The results were often disappointing. But he did learn something valuable. I had a question while reading Elysian's description. It said, a sword that destroys the evil and protects the good. Most would overlook such phrases, but Ian did not. He judged that there must be something hidden, and he had time to spare. He decided to test it. It wasn't a grand experiment. I just stabbed. He turned the sword, meant to pierce enemies, onto allies. At first, the results were not good. Was it Ilian? I stabbed him and he died instantly. Because of that, I was expelled from the hero's party and captured by the knights, leading to a bad ending. If he had stopped there, it would have been a fruitless endeavor. But Ian persisted. He kept stabbing everyone he saw and faced numerous bad endings. So much so that the demons began to suspect that the hero was actually a spy sent by the demon god. Perhaps his persistence was rewarded because, after many attempts, he discovered something new. Stabbing Saint Esclendia made me realize that the Holy Sword has no harmful effect on those with the Holy Attribute. When he pierced Saint Esclendia of Edinria, there was no wound. What did she say? It's a violent method, but it seems to restore my fatigue. The Holy Sword actually healed Glendia. It was a new realization about Elysian's hidden effect. Ian never forgot this newfound knowledge. If you learn something, you use it. The moment to apply that principle was now. Knelt Ian. Yes. Ian, now enveloped in divine power, took a deep breath and launched himself forward. He didn't manifest Heavenly Hand as he had when facing Beelzebub. There was no need to cause such destruction in the Grand Hall. The use of divine power isn't limited to Heavenly Hand. Manifesting Heavenly Hand was merely for bombing the area. Other methods were also possible. Among them, Ian chose to focus. He concentrated the divine power in his right hand. With a combination of Ether and Neltlian's divine power, Ian's right hand displayed extreme strength. Crack. GRRK. Boom. What is this? Ah. Not only did he withstand the demonic energy-enhanced strike of Elysian, but he also shattered it completely. Leviathan was flung back in shock. While others might have mocked their enemy, Ian was different. Swish. What speed? Surprised? It's too early for that. Ian only delved deeper into Leviathan's disrupted form. Bang. Boom. His punches landed in rapid succession. The demonic energy surrounding Ariel started to crack with each hit, and Leviathan, unable to bear it, tried to raise her sword in defense. Crunch. Got you? But Ian wouldn't allow any such antics. Using ether, he materialized a hand to firmly grasp the blade, continuing his assault. Leviathan grimaced, and Ian, grabbing her neck while she was groggy, extended his arm and lifted her into the air. Clang. Grrrk. Elysian fell from her hand, and unable to breathe due to Ian's grip, Leviathan, despite the dire situation, smiled slyly. Gotten crazy after a few hits? Think what you want. Ian Volkanov. I suffer no damage in this state. Even with possession, if the host is attacked, isn't the damage inevitable? Ian's calm question wasn't wrong. However, Leviathan's laughter wasn't without reason. You figured that out? But did you know? To kill me, you have to end this child's life. Ariel's life? Yes. You won't do it. No matter how much you want to kill me, you won't kill your sister. Ian faced a dilemma. If he killed Ariel and Leviathan together, his life would end there. Without defeating the demon gods, eternal death awaited him. If he chose to save both, all his efforts would be in vain. Now. Choose, Ian Volkanov. Forced into making a choice, Ian did nothing. To be precise, he saw no need to act. Talking nonsense. What did you say? There are no negotiations with demons. That's my principle. He intended to save Ariel and kill Leviathan. That was why he orchestrated this situation. He hadn't endured all this to be swayed by Leviathan's words. Kill me? How exactly do you plan to do that? In possession, the only way to kill her was to eliminate the host, resulting in mutual destruction. If not, there was no way. What was he thinking to act so confidently? Leviathan wondered, but her curiosity didn't last long. You don't mean. In that moment, she saw it. Sizzle. Huff. Ian picked up the holy sword from the ground. Though his hand was burning from the sword's hatred, Ian didn't care and merely smirked. You wouldn't know this. Leviathan. The holy sword, a weapon that only those born with the holy attribute could wield, chosen by it. Those unworthy couldn't hold it, and even if they forced it, immense pain would follow. How? How can you wield the holy sword? The sword was already in Ian's hand. Leviathan, panicking, tried to end the possession quickly, but Ian was faster. Stab. Arg. After grabbing Leviathan, Ian immediately thrusted the holy sword into Ariel's body. Chapter 69, Third Secret, 1. Using the holy sword? That's impossible. That bastard. Leviathan couldn't comprehend the current situation. How could Ian be wielding the holy sword? Even as a demon living in hiding, biding her time in Astalgia, she wasn't ignorant of the Empire's forces. On the contrary, information was crucial in war, and the 7 demon kings sent their followers to gather all possible intelligence from the human world, using their demonic powers to extract every bit of knowledge they could. Among that information was plenty about Ian. He couldn't use a sword. I heard he was cursed when his master abandoned him. When he was active as a warrior party, he showed off his incredible skills to the point that he was deserving of his title as the next sword saint. But the information was clear, he could no longer wield a sword. She wouldn't believe it if it were mere rumor, but this was verified through their agents. I even heard the curse was placed by the head of the Miller family. And he overcame it? Leviathan's eyes darted back and forth as she tried to make sense of it all. How had he overcome the curse from such a renowned mage family? Her gaze fixed on Ian's hand, gripping the sword. Chiak. Is it burning? She saw Ian's hand paying the price for defying the curse. It was a terrifying sight, but that wasn't the end of his burden. Hulu. Do you even know what you're doing? Blood seeped from Ian's tightly closed lips, speaking volumes. You're not worthy of the holy sword. Such foolishness. Ian was enduring the cost of using the holy sword. Born with the dark attribute, he was the opposite of Elysian, a holy weapon. No matter how much closer his behavior was to a hero than Ariel's, it didn't change the fact that he was unworthy. That's why. Doesn't he know he has to endure the pain? Leviathan couldn't understand Ian's actions. If he knows and still does it, how can he? She never imagined he would directly use the holy sword. Once enamored and envious of its power, she had even tried to steal Elysian from the Empire. If she succeeded, ending the long battle wouldn't just be a dream. The Empire, deprived of Elysian, would fall to the demons, and the residents of Astalgia could escape their shadowy existence to face the sun. After making that resolution, she planned meticulously and challenged countless times. She had real opportunities to kill the hero and seize the sword, coming close many times. But Elysian never ended up in her hands. Why? It was simple. Just touching it made my body twist and feel like it would burst. The holy sword rejected the unchosen. Even the Demon King of Wrath, one of the strongest in the demon world, couldn't hold it for 10 seconds. How could a human endure what even such a being couldn't? How can he be so foolish? Even as she closed her eyes in pain, Leviathan thought Ian was reckless. What confidence made him hold on to something that overpowered even a demon king? She didn't understand. Why was he doing this? If he chose to save them both, he wouldn't have to endure this pain. Leviathan looked at Ian with questioning eyes and made her decision. Pride. Maybe you're right. Indeed, humans are unpredictable beings. At least she couldn't understand Ian's actions. At that moment, Leviathan gave up trying to read his thoughts. She only thought about the outcome. Alright. Let's see who wins. Will you, a lowly mortal, endure longer, or will I win? Let's find out. She had lived her life under suspicion. Even when her name was renowned in Astalgia, the label of insufficient strength haunted her. It didn't end even when she became a demon king. Among the 7 demon kings, only Asmodeus was a comparable opponent, the rest were all monsters. Yet Leviathan never gave up, despite her jealousy. Strength alone wasn't the measure of power. Surviving to the end, that was strength. She didn't forget that belief. She wouldn't change it and would prove it by rising to the position of demon king. For that, enduring this pain was reason enough. KKRR. Ho. A pained groan escaped her lips. The holy sword wouldn't hurt her directly, but as long as Leviathan possessed someone, she felt all the pain. She felt like she might lose consciousness at any moment, but she gritted her teeth and counted inwardly. Just 10 seconds. I only need to endure 10 seconds. Endure until the moment even the Demon King of Wrath gave up, and victory is hers. Even though she wanted to give up, she clung to the thought and endured. Time felt eternal. She thought that when she opened her eyes, she would be free from this pain. Finally, when the 10 seconds ended and she opened her eyes, she saw it. Huff. Enduring is meaningless. Just die quickly. What? How? Ian, steadfastly gripping the sword, enduring the pain. Leviathan had expected to see Ian's face pale and bleeding when she opened her eyes. She hadn't imagined seeing this. How was he enduring? Was he pretending to be okay? But if that were the case, his expression hasn't changed at all. Thinking he might have some hidden ace, Leviathan scrutinized Ian closely. And then she understood. Now that I think about it, the aura surrounding him has vanished. The powerful aura that had matched her demonic energy had disappeared. No, it hadn't disappeared. No way. Did he use that to suppress the power of the holy sword? Impossible. To do something like that, he would need power comparable to a god's. How could a mere human? Wait. Could that power I saw earlier have been divine power? Was Ian Volkanov truly chosen by a god? Damn it. In this unforeseen situation, Leviathan's pupils trembled. If he used divine power to suppress the holy sword's backlash, enduring would be meaningless. She couldn't afford to stand idle. She needed to withdraw the blade immediately. Leviathan tried to push the blade away. You understand now? But it's too late. Slash. Ian put more strength into the sword and sliced across. The horrific sound of flesh being cut echoed, but Ariel's body was unharmed. Only Leviathan suffered. Ah. Ah. Leviathan clutched her abdomen. In front of her, Ian planted the holy sword into the ground and looked at his right hand. A hand burnt black, a result of the sword's curse and the backlash of using the holy sword. It's worse than I expected. From Leviathan's perspective, it might seem like he endured the sword's power effortlessly. But that wasn't the truth. He had directed all his divine power to his hand gripping the sword's hilt. And he had been using rapid regeneration to heal continuously. Even with his best efforts, the extent of the injury showed the significant backlash of Elysian. Every movement of his hand sent waves of pain, but he couldn't stop now. He couldn't let go of this hard-earned opportunity because of pain. Click. Ian gripped the holy sword again. With most of his divine power used up, it was his only weapon left to kill Leviathan. Huff. Ian took a calm breath, closed his eyes, and swung the sword. He didn't think about how to swing it. In his current state, contemplating the swing was useless. I need to focus on my instincts. Instead, he relied on his innate talent. Before he had been possessed, Ian Volkanov had been called the next sword saint for a reason. Even though he hadn't used a sword in months, the efforts of his past wouldn't disappear. Moreover, he had sparred countless times with Alex Volkanov. The saying seeing is believing exists for a reason. Although he hadn't used a sword then, the experience of facing a master's swordsmanship would guide him. Ian believed in that firmly. Thanks to that. Swish. Slash. Gah. He was confident that the sword he wielded now wouldn't miss. The sensation of cutting through something transmitted from the hilt to his nerves. Without opening his eyes, Ian continued to swing the sword. Thud thud thud. In a state of complete concentration, he continued swinging the sword. The fierce windstorm ceased 5 minutes later. When the screams stopped, Ian opened his eyes. I. The demonic energy dispersed into the air with a wailing sound. Kneeling on the ground, Ariel's body emitted the demonic energy that scattered into the air. The meaning was simple. The Lord of the Abyss targeting you has vanished, you have completed the emergency quest. This was the end of Leviathan, the Demon King blinded by jealousy. Ugh. Damn it. After Leviathan's demise, Ian vomited the blood that had pooled inside him. Though he had tried to minimize the side effects using divine power, it wasn't as easy as he had hoped. Well, what can you do? If he had just thrust the sword, it would have been different, but he had unleashed the relentless sword technique in a state of frenzy. The 10 seconds he spent with the sword embedded had already caused his hand to be severely burned. He should be satisfied that it ended there. Super regeneration. I can't use it. Neltlian, in slime form, was writhing on the floor. Though she had grown into a child's form, excessive use of divine power had caused her to revert to her previous state. It's just a temporary state due to overuse of power. It's not permanent regression. His hand was severely burned, and that was not all. Even Neltlian had returned to her slime form. It was a reckless act, but under the circumstances, it was the best option. He was confident he would make the same choice even if he went back in time. If I failed, it's my fault, but that's not the case here. He had killed Leviathan and saved Ariel. That was enough, wasn't it? Seeing Ariel breathing, her health didn't seem to have any significant issues. Whatever damage she sustained, she would recover and stand up after being stabbed and slashed by the holy sword. Just as he was about to sit down and take a breather on the floor, he noticed something. But why isn't the surrounding demonic energy disappearing? Leviathan should have been dead and gone, right? He checked his status window to see if there was anything unusual, but nothing stood out. The notification says the quest was completed normally. He succeeded in defeating the abyssal being. Doesn't that mean Leviathan disappeared? Then it would be normal for the magic to disappear. Sometimes, if the opponent's demonic energy is excessively vast, it takes time to disappear, but Leviathan's demonic energy shouldn't be like this. She had consumed a lot of her own life force. The entity had depleted so much of its own energy. What was even more surprising was that the surrounding demonic energy wasn't fading, it was intensifying. What the hell is going on? Why isn't it disappearing? Just as Ian was preparing for potential danger, a sudden announcement popped up. Ding. Confirm the third secret as the reward, you will meet a being that knows the truth. What? The status window was rapidly filling up. Meeting someone? Was it not the same as viewing past situations as he had done before? A being that knows the truth? Who could that be? Before he could ponder further, a grave voice echoed behind him. Mortal who has wandered through the eons. What? A serious voice rang out from behind him. Ian turned his head to confirm the identity of the voice and was able to see. You. I knew you had reached your limits. In the end, you've closed your eyes and ears, excising your wounds. How truly regrettable. The being was of an entirely different caliber than anyone he had encountered before. Just being in the same space felt suffocating, and Ian could feel the hairs on his body standing on end. At that moment, he instinctively recognized the entity's identity. Few beings possessed such an aura. The being of the abyss descends before you. Belfdor. The demon king of sloth, Belfdor. Even if his strength was comparable to that of the demon god, it would not be an exaggeration to call him a monster. The moment he revealed himself was imminent. Chapter 70, Third Secret, 2, Why on earth was he here? I thought Elysian would appear, given it was someone who knows the truth. Of course, Belfdor might also know some truths. After all, Ian's previous memories suggested someone from the demonic side had promised to help him. Judging from the current circumstances, it seemed that person was indeed Belfdor. With such grand claims, he couldn't be an ordinary demon, right? If he didn't wield significant influence among the demons, he wouldn't speak in such a way. But that wasn't the only reason. Unlike the other demon kings who constantly targeted Ian, Belfdor had been merely observing the situation. No matter how he thought about it, the one Elysian had referred to must have been Belfdor. Right. I only thought of him as the one who promised support. He had never imagined that he would be the one who knew all the truths. That was why. Are you the one who knows all the truth? Yes. Ian had asked again for confirmation. Despite Ian's abrupt question, Belfdor merely looked at him with a sorrowful expression. I hoped it wasn't true, but it seems you've indeed lost all your memories. Lost my memories? What are you talking about? I understand your curiosity. I, too, wish I could explain everything, but we don't have the luxury of time for that. Though he wanted to answer Ian's questions, starting with what he meant by losing his memories, there wasn't enough time to explain everything. Wasting precious time on stories that would be hard to understand without context was not an option. As someone obligated to reveal hidden secrets, Belfgur had no choice. I know you're troubled, but please understand. For your sake, I can't tell you everything. However, if you have other questions, I can answer those. Then, why don't you follow the same path as the other demon kings? Why I don't follow the same path? Belfgur raised an eyebrow at the sudden question. He might have wondered why Ian was asking this. Others might have first asked why he was possessed. But Ian thought differently. Asking why I'm the one possessed is meaningless. What's important now is learning about our enemies. He knew dwelling on the past wouldn't improve the situation. Even if he couldn't change the past from 3 seconds ago, he could change the future. My goal is to kill the demon god safely and achieve a happy ending. Nothing else matters. For a bright future, knowing about his enemies was crucial. What were the remaining demon kings thinking? Why didn't Belfgur, despite his power, aim for the demon god's position? This is an unexpected question. But you've always been someone with incomprehensible thoughts. Didn't you say we don't have much time? We should avoid idle talk. Don't rush me. I have time to answer your question. Belfgur, lost in thought, slightly raised the corner of his mouth. First, let me say this. Unlike the other demon kings, I have no intention of attacking you. I am entirely on your side. I hope you understand this. Then, why do you act differently? Is it because you have no interest in worldly affairs? A demon who didn't care about worldly matters and spent his time leisurely in his territory. That was Belfgur. So, was he doing nothing because, as the demon king of sloth, he simply had no interest in worldly affairs? As Ian tried to organize his questions, Belfgur continued. It's simple. To prevent the demon god's death. What? Ian's mouth hung open, caught off guard by the answer. What is he talking about? Prevent the demon god's death? What did that even mean? If that was the case, then Belfgur was no different from the other demon kings? Seeing Ian's confused expression, Belfgur closed his eyes, seemingly contemplating. After about 5 seconds, he spoke again. Perhaps I spoke too briefly. Given that your memories were erased, you might not understand. Let me clarify this. The demon god must never be eliminated. The moment Ian began to realize the hidden secrets. Belfgur's assertion that the demon god must exist was not something Ian could easily comprehend. After all, hadn't he been tirelessly working towards defeating the demon god all this time? But if the demon god is actually someone who shouldn't disappear, what did that mean for everything he had done so far? What about the quests given to him during his possession? Was either Belfgur or the quest lying to him? Understanding Ian's turmoil, Belfgur nodded and began summoning his demonic energy. Why are you suddenly using your demonic energy? Don't be alarmed. It's not to attack you. As Belfgur had said, the dark energy dispersed, altering the space around them. Just as legendary grandmasters used mana to create their own domains, Belfgur was using his dark energy to dominate the space. Seeing this, it's understandable that his power rivals that of the demon god. And this was Belfgur, even while restrained by the limitations of meddling in the middle realm. If he could exhibit such strength while shackled, what must he be capable of in his home realm of Astelgia? Whoosh! While Ian was in awe, the dark energy began forming a scene. It created a vision of the cosmos. An endlessly vast black space, with the planet Gaia at its center, the stage for the heroic academy. Gaia resembled Earth closely, but the key difference was the presence of 2 protective barriers surrounding it. Are those barriers? Yes, they're protective shields to safeguard Gaia from external threats. External threats? The universe outside Gaia is vast, beyond comprehension. Naturally, there are other life forms as well. In fact, the discovery of extraterrestrial life was made long ago. At that time, Belfgur wasn't particularly interested in them. The reason? Most of them were insignificant. They were beings inferior to humans, mere insects in comparison. However, as time passed, he could no longer remain indifferent. There are a few, though, that can be considered gods. The moment he discovered the alien gods he had observed while observing the universe, the so-called outer gods. Monsters. Then those protective barriers were created to shield Gaia from the outer gods. The outer barrier was made by the demon god, and the inner one by Eris. Although their purpose is more about camouflage than protection. Camouflage. As Ian's sharp eyes surveyed the created scene, he began to understand. The demon god, ruler of Astelgia, and Eris, the goddess of peace. Weren't they the most powerful entities in Heroic Academy? If even they found it necessary to create barriers to conceal Gaia, the outer gods must be unimaginably powerful. If the demon god is using his power to protect Gaia, it makes sense why Belphegor wants to prevent his death. If the demon god were to disappear, the responsibility of protecting Gaia would fall solely on Eris. However, that didn't resolve all of Ian's questions. There were still many unresolved issues. There's something I'm curious about. Can I ask? Feel free. We still have some time. I know that the Holy Sword Delusion was created by Eris to kill the demon god. But if they are in a cooperative relationship, why create a weapon to kill each other? If Eris and the demon god were in a cooperative relationship, creating such a weapon seemed contradictory to Ian. Also, the prophecy given to the heroes party. Doesn't that mean Eris ordered the demon god's death? Understanding the importance of this question, Belphegor began to explain. As you said, the Holy Sword was indeed created to kill the demon god. It was made to prevent any impulsive actions from either side. So then. However, the current demon god isn't opposed to Eris. The prophecy Eris gave refers to a different individual. A different individual? Eris, the goddess of peace, uses her divine power to foresee the future. She has frequently used this power to protect Gaia. Until now, there hadn't been any significant crises. Though wars between humans and demons frequently broke out, they were instigated by the demon kings, not the demon god himself. Eris had assumed there would be no major issues in the future as well. However, the world wasn't solely inhabited by rational beings, as Eris had hoped. But recently, Eris mentioned that something is wrong with her prophecies. She said the future is being destroyed. Does that mean there are entities causing chaos? Yes, they are Pride and Wrath. You might know them better as Lucifer and Satan. Although they couldn't rival the demon god or Belphegor, these powerful demon kings were indeed problematic. Pride and Wrath were dissatisfied with the current balance maintained by Eris and the demon god. Their discontent grew, eventually leading them to extreme measures. They wondered what would happen if they could take the demon god's place since they were almost on par with him even as demon kings. If they could ascend to the demon god's position, they would gain powers befitting that role. To make matters worse, the current demon god was aging and expected to pass his position to a demon king soon. For Lucifer and Satan, who had been biding their time, this was the perfect opportunity. Are you saying that they? Yes, you're correct. They intended for one of them to become the demon god, obtain his powers, and then confront the outer gods. Tired of their oppressed existence, they decided to abandon their shared rule with Eris. They sought not only to dominate Gaia but also to subjugate the outer gods. Their plan reached Eris, who then read the future once again. The future she saw was destruction. They might have thought it was possible. It might seem like a foolish and arrogant decision, but from Lucifer and Satan's perspective, it wasn't entirely unreasonable. Outer gods. They had only heard tales of their might but had never actually faced them. Just as one must measure to know what's long and what's short, Lucifer and Satan believed they could handle a battle against the outer gods. Even as demon kings, they were only slightly weaker than a demon god. They must have thought they wouldn't be lacking if they became the demon god themselves. After making up their minds, they boldly killed the demon god and Eris, taking control of Gaia. But their end was not favorable. Those two failed to protect Gaia from the attacks of the outer gods. The moment the veil that protected Gaia from the predator's eyes was lifted, the predator's fangs gleamed. The outer gods, who had ruled the unknown reaches of the universe, tore apart the new demon gods. That was when they realized the future held only destruction. So, the demon god that the prophecy said must be killed is not the current demon god, Azidahaka, but Lucifer and Satan. So, those two were the cause of all this. Belphegor nodded solemnly, but Yin couldn't hide his shock. It was only natural, given the overwhelming amount of information being dumped on him all at once. It would have been fine if he had time to process it, but Belphegor, unfortunately, didn't have that luxury. After catching his breath for a moment, Belphegor continued. Eris, after confirming the future, immediately appointed a hero. The hero was your sister, Ariel Volkanov. I know. She awakened as a hero around the age of 6. Fortunately, they found someone with the potential to be a hero, but the situation was still dire. The hero was too weak. Weak? Due to her unfortunate childhood, she couldn't get along with her party members, fell into severe depression, and lacked the will to fight. The hero's party. In public perception, the hero did everything while the party members were merely supporting cast. But that was far from the truth. The party members were essential to compensate for the hero's shortcomings. Every interaction and cooperation were crucial, and they needed to form a close bond to watch each other's backs in battle. Ariel, however, couldn't do this. As a hero, she should have led her party, but she was weak-willed and couldn't trust others. At that point, Eris and the demon god had no choice but to find a new solution. They faced countless failures. Of course, each time they used divine power to turn back the timeline. But eventually, they couldn't endure any longer. If they used too much divine power, maintaining the barrier would become difficult. Exactly. Countless debates ensued as they tried to find a solution. They pondered endlessly on how to deal with Lucifer and Satan, exchanging numerous opinions. Gradually, they converged on one idea. Horus and the demon god decided to find a helper for the hero. Given the shortage of time and divine power, selecting a new hero was out of the question. Finding a helper was the best option. At that time, I heard that Ariel, the only child of the Volcaner family, had an older brother. Of course, he was stillborn. Stillborn? What does that mean? They thought, if they could create someone who could empathize with her lonely and troubled childhood, they could make her stronger by using that as a medium for her happiness. What? Stillborn? Only child? What on earth did that mean? Belphegor's words implied that Yin's very existence was never meant to be. What on earth does this mean? Ian looked at him, expecting an explanation. However, Belphegor continued to convey what needed to be said. Horus adjusted the world to save that child. Of course, the body was already dead, and the soul had long departed. But it didn't matter. As long as the soul can be retrieved. It was the moment when Belphegor moved in place of the demon god, who had excessively consumed his divine power, and Eris. He sought out beings from other realms who could empathize with the current situation and lend their power. Finally, he succeeded in saving a soul. Thanks to that. No way. That's right, it's you, Li Haiyan-Wu. The reason Ian Volkanov, who shouldn't have existed in the world, was able to live. Ian was supposed to die, and Heroic Academy was created by Belphegor to bring my soul here? The grand secret was unveiled, but that didn't solve all the questions. Ian couldn't understand why he was chosen if they truly wanted to save a worthy soul when there were other seasoned individuals available. To uncover the hidden story, Ian lifted his head and saw it. Crack. The space is breaking? It seems our time is almost up. The space was distorting, and the demonic energy was scattering rapidly. The constraints on Belphegor, who had intervened in the middle realm, were becoming severe. Unfortunately, it seems I can't reveal more of the remaining truth. It was truly unfortunate, but on the other hand, Belphegor thought it was a relief. Because he could convey this one truth. Anyway, remember this one thing. You were created for Ariel. Belphegor paused to catch his breath and then continued. You have repeatedly sacrificed countless times for Ariel. Chapter 71, Third Secret, 3. Ian Volkanov had been created and repeatedly sacrificed himself for Ariel. These words struck Ian deeply. It felt as if his very existence was being denied. I thought it was just a simple possession. He had long been aware that, for some reason, his soul had vanished, and something had taken its place. However, according to his words, it meant that Ian had never existed from the beginning. It was all me? The Ian from the original story never existed. It was just a past version of Li Haiyan-Wu. Although a great truth was revealed, it didn't resolve his questions. In fact, it did the opposite. It made him more curious. Why on earth? Why did Eris and Belphegor choose him? What kind of life had he lived up until now? Ian wanted answers to these questions, but unfortunately, Belphegor was not in a position to answer them. SRRK. Belphegor's form began to blur. His figure was gradually fading away, swept by the blowing wind. Are you disappearing already? I still have more to ask. I would also like to answer more, but I cannot defy Gaia's restrictions. Belphegor knew how cruel it was to appear only to deliver such a shocking revelation. But he wasn't particularly worried. The Ian he had observed wasn't someone who would crumble because of this. Don't worry too much. If you continue as you have been, you'll gradually uncover the truth. I look forward to our next meeting. With those words, Belphegor completely vanished. It was the end of the third truth Ian had obtained as a reward. As he watched Belphegor fade away, he felt a mix of emotions. What? Is this? What? It was at that moment that he heard a soft female voice behind him. It was a familiar voice. He had heard it countless times and knew exactly who it belonged to. Ariel. What do you mean? You sacrificed yourself for me? What on earth are you talking about? Ariel Volkanov. It was the moment she learned a hidden truth. What have I done? Ariel was floating alone in an entirely black space. Her body moved with the flow of consciousness as if she were dreaming. But Ariel knew this was not a dream. To become a hero and then get possessed by a demon, losing my body. Why do heroes gain recognition and fame? Is it not because they save people from the demons? Fame and recognition do not come easily. They follow only by inheriting the faith and will of the people. A hero losing their body to a demon, Ariel couldn't bring herself to lift her head. Is that why Elysian doesn't respond to my voice? Maybe it's because of what kind of hero she had become. Perhaps it didn't want to lend its power to her. A deep sigh echoed in the space. What should she do now? Was there a way to reclaim her body? Even if I reclaim my body, what should I do afterward? She would have to apologize to the students, and her reputation would be ruined. She thought it was already at rock bottom, but it could fall even lower. Her reputation was in tatters, but what Ariel cared about most was her relationships with her friends. I don't want to be alone. She feared growing distant. She couldn't bear the thought of becoming estranged from those who had always loved and supported her. How could she restore their relationships? Just as she was pondering this, it happened. SRRK. What? Light. In the dark, pitch-black space, a crack appeared, and bright light entered her eyes. You have repeatedly sacrificed countless times for Ariel. It was the moment she heard the voice of the transcendent being standing before Ian. He sacrificed himself for me? Ariel's pupils trembled as if an earthquake had struck, unable to conceal her shock. What does that even mean? Her mind seemed to stop. The worries that had plagued her incessantly just moments ago vanished from her thoughts. Ian sacrificed himself for me? At first, she wanted to deny it. After all, who was Ian? He was the person who had constantly blocked her path and hindered her progress. She had missed perfect opportunities to confront the Demon Kings, and after enrolling in Arc Academy, he had thoroughly oppressed her. That he had sacrificed himself? For her? It's a lie. If he had truly lived for Ariel, wouldn't he have helped her in her conquests? She wanted to dismiss it as a lie, but Ariel couldn't do that. The presence that made her body tremble just by looking at it didn't seem like it was lying. Stunned, Ariel remained silent until Belphegor disappeared. Only after the demonic aura completely vanished did she open her mouth. Say something. What does it mean that you sacrificed yourself for me? She cried out desperately, hoping he would tell her it was a lie, that it couldn't be true. If it were true that he had sacrificed himself, she wouldn't be able to face him. In a way, it was fear. The person who had supported her all along was someone else, and she had been rejecting him without even knowing it. She hoped it wasn't true, so she stared intently at him. How am I supposed to explain this? Ian felt just as frustrated. He hadn't expected Ariel to regain her senses at this moment. I let my guard down. If I had known, I would have insisted on having this conversation somewhere Ariel wasn't present. Up until now, he had verified all his rewards in dreams. He had assumed this time would be similar, leading to this unexpected situation. Thankfully, it seemed Ariel hadn't grasped the entire truth. Judging by what she is saying, it seems she only heard the last part. If she had heard more, she wouldn't be demanding an explanation. Even as he racked his brain, Ariel kept her gaze fixed on him. She wants me to say it isn't true. Ariel was desperate. Although he wanted to tell her what she wished to hear, he couldn't. But Ian wasn't in a state to consider her feelings. The person most distressed in this situation was himself, and he wasn't capable of comforting anyone right now. So, you won't tell me? With his silence continuing, Ariel stood up. After grabbing her sword, she turned and walked away. Fine, don't tell me. I'll find out on my own. If he didn't want to reveal the truth, she would uncover it herself. Realizing she wouldn't get anything from Ian, Ariel left immediately. Swoosh. Ian watched her retreating figure in a daze. He wanted to comfort her somehow, but he couldn't. What is going on? Ariel's expression at the end, filled with determination, was a clear indication she would strive to uncover the hidden truth on her own. This complicates things. While he had succeeded in dealing with Leviathan, he couldn't consider the current situation favorable. According to his original plan, he had intended to deal with the Demon King and then restore his relationship with the estranged heroines. But now, Ariel, instead of talking to the heroines, had set off to uncover the truth on her own. Considering her character, she wouldn't return until she had the answer she wanted. It was in that moment, lamenting the reality far surpassing his expectations, that he felt a deep sense of frustration. Ian. You're alive. Neltlian, having regained her strength, wiggled and moved around. With her complexion restored, she jumped up and nestled into Ian's arms. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Rubbing her face against Ian's with delight, Neltlian suddenly flinched and puffed out her cheeks. Ian. I told you not to overdo it. I'm sorry. This time I had no choice. Still, I was worried. I didn't expect you to use all of your divine power. Neltlian pouted, upset that Ian had recklessly used his divine power. Of course, it wasn't because Ian had used her power without permission. Given the contract they had made to help each other, she wouldn't be angry over something like that. The reason Neltlian was upset lay elsewhere. I thought something had gone wrong. The fact that he had fought an opponent so powerful he had to use all his divine power. The amount of power used to the point of losing consciousness meant Ian had been in a tight spot, which naturally worried her. Living life on the edge like walking a tightrope, it was inevitable for her to feel anxious. When hunting beings like Lilith or Beelzebub, hadn't he used his life as bait countless times to hunt down his enemies? It was fortunate he succeeded, but had he failed, what would this fool have done? Thus, Ian could only say one thing to her. I'll be really careful from now on. Do you promise? Can we promise later? Neltlian pouted but eventually nodded, realizing she had no other choice. As he held her and rested for a moment, she suddenly spoke up. Oh right. Ian, look over there. Look. Huh? What am I supposed to see? Neltlian pointed and raised her voice. Her finger was aimed at the spot where Ariel had collapsed after he used the holy sword to slay a Leviathan. Why does she want me to look there? He wondered as he turned his head and saw it. What is that? A fallen object in the corner caught his eye. It had been hidden behind the items decorating the lobby, but now he saw it clearly. He got up and approached, curious. What is this? Are my eyes deceiving me? On the ground lay a sword. A weapon with a black blade interwoven with blood-red lines. Ian knew what it was. Is this really appearing now? Seriously? Chapter 72, Sealed Demon Sword, 1. Upon receiving the report that Leviathan had been discovered in Ark, Piers's expression soured. Despite his life, which had been filled with complexities, from being born as the first prince of the empire to achieving the position of archbishop in Edinria, getting used to shock was never an easy feat. So Leviathan descended, taking Ariel Volkanov as its host, and Ian handled it? Fortunately, the incident was resolved before it could escalate into a major problem. However, there was no room for celebration. Not only had the entity appeared in Ark, the heart of the empire and the cradle of students, but it had also seized the body of the hero. So Ian Volkanov solved what we needed to do. On the surface, it seemed like a complete failure on the part of the empire, but Edinria also bore some responsibility. As the children of Eris, it was their duty to manage and contain demonic beings that disrupted peace and to oversee the hero. They had failed utterly in this regard. With deep attachments to both the Empire and Edinria, Piers was naturally troubled. He felt a deep sense of gratitude towards Ian for preventing a catastrophe. How should I repay him? While this might be the first instance, Ian had already eradicated countless demons. Having already dealt with 4 demon kings, it was essential to prepare an appropriate reward as soon as possible. According to Abdaith, he doesn't particularly like anything and is obsessed with becoming stronger. So, perhaps providing him with the opportunity to conquer a dungeon would be appropriate? Given that the start of the new term was delayed due to the incident, Ian might find himself with idle time. While others might be eager to enjoy themselves, Ian, as Piers knew him, would likely be looking to train. Providing him with a suitable dungeon might satisfy him. Yes, giving him the opportunity to conquer a dungeon would be a good idea. Not only could he increase his practical skills by hunting monsters, but it would also be an opportunity to obtain valuable byproducts. Furthermore, dungeons in Edinria were renowned for their exceptional items. Offering him the chance to tackle such a dungeon would make for a great gift. The reward was decided. The remaining task was to overcome the obstacle. The problem is how to persuade Archbishop Raymond. Raymond had been a staunch conservative and had shown resistance towards Ian. Given his position as Archbishop, no matter how influential Piers might be, it would be impossible to provide dungeon opportunities without Raymond's approval. What should I do? With a deep sigh, Piers recalled the conversation he had with the Saintess Glendia. The Saintess said. That's what she said. He had chanced upon her while wandering the garden in frustration. Initially intending only to greet her, he ended up engaging in a light conversation. Glendia had clearly said, just do as you think is right. She had advised him to push for what he wanted, adding that, since it was a good cause, Raymond would likely not oppose it. However, Piers could not be entirely at ease. Will it really be alright? He knew very well what kind of person Archbishop Raymond was. At least, the Raymond Piers knew was not one to easily back down. Though he was not a rigid or stubborn individual, he was someone who would not easily bend his own views. Moreover, considering that Yin had once bested him, Raymond might still harbor resentment. Because of this, I must find a way to persuade him. Standing in front of Archbishop Raymond's office for a long while, Piers finally made up his mind. He had to find a way to ensure Yin received his reward. Regardless of politics or anything else, it was simply the right thing to do. Steeling himself, Piers prepared to persuade Raymond. When he finally entered the office, the conversation was surprisingly brief. A dungeon, you say? I've already arranged that. Pardon? You've already given it? Yes. Upon hearing the news that Leviathan was defeated, I hastily arranged the reward. If anyone deserves such a reward, it's Ian Volkanov. Do you have anything else to say? Raymond's nonchalant demeanor left Piers speechless. Nothing. I'll take my leave. Faced with a Raymond so different from what he had known, Piers could only close his mouth. What would be an appropriate weapon for the king of all weapons? There were many options available. There was the spear with its overwhelming reach that could be learned relatively quickly, and there was the bow for long-range shooting. If not those, there were also daggers known for their portability and agility. However, there was one weapon that Ian believed was most fitting. It's the sword. Maybe it's different in reality, but in Heroic Academy, the sword is supreme. The sword, which most protagonists use in fictional works, was considered the best choice. Why? It was simple. Ariel uses a sword. In Heroic Academy, where the protagonist Ariel Volkanov uses the Holy Sword, most hidden pieces and items that boost character stats were tailored to sword usage. In other words, using any weapon other than a sword would mean struggling, but with a sword, one could quickly catch up by finding a few hidden pieces. Is it because of that advantage? Ian had analyzed extensively to find the best sword for players of Heroic Academy. Over time, potential candidates began to emerge. Among them, the top choices were the Holy Sword Elysian and the Demon Sword Reborn. The first was Elysian, Ariel's unique weapon. The second was Reborn, the demon sword created by Leviathan. Unlike Elysian, which could only be used by the hero, Reborn could be wielded by any character. Ian was well acquainted with this weapon. I've used it a few times while leveling other characters. And it wasn't bad. Initially skeptical, he found it to be a quite effective weapon. As a weapon created by the Demon of Envy Leviathan, it had a crazy feature where it adjusted its power based on the disparity between the user and the opponent. As a demon sword, it also had remarkable durability. Despite its debuff that continuously drained health and prevented recovery for characters who weren't of the darkness attribute, its performance was so overpowered that it was frequently used. Before the seal was lifted, it was just a sword with a debuff. But once the seal was lifted, its performance was so extreme that it made one wonder if the developers had purposely avoided creating dark attribute characters. Even while using it, he had wondered if it was truly fair. In the community, wasn't it famously said that Reborn was the ultimate weapon in 1v1 situations, surpassing even Elysian? So much so that there were those who called Elysian the Demon Broom due to its damage correction against demons and powerful area attacks, while referring to Reborn as the true Holy Sword. They used to joke that the Holy Sword is one that is wielded through hardship and adversity. While such talk was nonsense, the fact remained that Reborn was an excellent weapon comparable to Elysian. That's why. That kind of weapon is here? That's why he was surprised when he saw Reborn lying on the ground. Given the demon sword's powerful attributes, its drop rate was exceedingly low. There was even an analysis indicating that fewer people had Reborn compared to achievement items from Chapter 5, where Leviathan was the main boss. In a situation where getting the weapon after defeating Leviathan thousands of times was a gamble, it was no wonder Ian would appreciate it. If it were a game, I might have considered myself lucky to obtain such a weapon. But to get it after possessing it. Even though he couldn't touch it yet due to the Blade of Hatred curse, the sight of Reborn's brilliant form left him open-mouthed. The curse hatred of the blade is almost removed. Currently, 95% of the curse removal has been completed. The realization that he would soon be able to use the weapon he had only been able to look at filled him with hope. Although I haven't been paying attention to how much of the curse has been removed. If it continues like this, it will be great. Even if the curse was lifted, he would still primarily use his well-practiced martial arts, but being able to use a sword would be beneficial. If I can use both a sword and my fists, no one will be able to overpower me in close combat. While it might be challenging if one's skills were average and they couldn't leverage their strengths, Ian didn't think that would be the case. I'm confident that boxing and jiu-jitsu will work well. And I can learn swordsmanship. It might be a bold statement, but he was aware of his own talent. He was confident that there was no one in this world who could match Ian Volkanov's talent. Learning swordsmanship might be a challenge, but he could always train with Alex Volkanov if needed. So the remaining task is to resolve Reborn's seal? At that moment, Ian's expression hardened again. The seal on Reborn. It was not just the curse but the seal itself that was a significant headache. To lift the seal, I need to go to a place where an item that can remove the curse on the weapon drops. And that place is a dungeon in Edinraya. He was sure about where and what item he needed. The real problem was how to get there. If it was in the Empire, I could at least contact Bedon and figure something out. But my memory says it's in Edinraya. This was the reason for his anxiety about solving the seal. While the Empire and Edinraya were on friendly terms, it was unlikely they would casually grant access to their dungeons. Dungeons are the perfect place for training. So they wouldn't just hand them over. Dungeons were formed in secluded places like caves where magical energy coalesced. They were meticulously managed because hunting monsters there provided immense experience points. Would they really give that up? To someone from the Empire? What should I do? Especially after playing tricks on Archbishop Raymond, Our relations with the Dinria are probably strained. Lost in thought, he was deeply immersed in his concerns when suddenly... Clunk. Squad commander. I brought some medicine for the burns. Eri approached with a stern expression, carrying a bundle of medicine. She looked at Ian, who was sitting on the floor, with a cold gaze. Didn't I tell you to lie down? You've gotten so hurt. The burns on my hands were healed with super regeneration. Even so, you're still injured, aren't you? Don't do anything foolish, just rest. Under Eri's piercing gaze, Ian had no choice but to lie back on the bed. What could he do? It was true that he had caused her worry. Despite her stern words, remembering how she had clutched his blackened right hand and whimpered, he couldn't say much. As he settled into the soft bed. Oh, right. You should see this. What is it? It's a letter from Archbishop Raymond. Raymond. So it's from Edenria. Eri handed him a letter adorned with the Edenria emblem. Was it another attempt at a visit due to impatience? Ian quickly checked the letter, bracing himself for the contents. We sincerely thank Ian Volkanov for his dedication in dealing with the Demon King Leviathan. Even though we were unable to repay your previous extravagant welcome due to the recent events, we feel deeply ashamed. What's this? Has Raymond suddenly become amicable? Relieved that no further mishap had occurred, he continued reading the letter. Therefore, we have sent you a gift. We hope you will find it to your liking. A gift? What could it be? Inside the envelope was something that initially seemed like paper but upon closer inspection was not ordinary. We have arranged for you to have access to one of Edenria's dungeons. If you present the accompanying document, you will be granted entry. At that moment, Ian found a clue that might unlock the seal on Reborn. Chapter 73, Sealed Demon Sword, 2. The place where the item to break the seal of Reborn was located was a dungeon at the border between Edenria and the Empire. Since the break had been extended due to the Leviathan incident, Ian Volkanov immediately took a carriage toward Edenria. Initially, he considered searching for Ariel's traces, but he decided that unsealing Reborn took priority. I know how powerful Reborn is. I can't just give that up. From what Belfgur had said, Satan and Lucifer wouldn't just sit idly by. The situation had reached a point where the demon kings who could have bought time for his plan were now annihilated. Even those who had been acting leisurely must have started to feel anxious, and they would soon be making their moves. You always have to prepare for the worst-case scenario. If he could obtain Reborn, a weapon that could rival the Holy Sword Delusion, it would be a satisfying preparation. If there were still a long way to go before lifting the curse, perhaps he would have gone to find Ariel. Honestly, it wouldn't have been a bad choice. But that wasn't the case. With only about 5% of the curse left to remove, this was the best course of action. That was the reason. Phew. The reason why Ian quickly packed and headed straight to Edenria. Of course, he wasn't going alone. Didn't you tell me this was outdoor training? Why are we riding in a carriage instead of using a proper training ground, Ian? Training outside is outdoor training, isn't it? Don't worry, I've got somewhere to go. What are you up to this time? I have no idea anymore. Igor, who had boarded the carriage, leaned back against the seat as if giving up. Igor was the companion Ian chose for this trip. There were plenty of people I could have brought along. Eri, Leah, or even Reina and Bianca would have gladly come if I asked. But Ian specifically picked Igor, and for a good reason. Given that the situation at Arc Academy was an emergency with demons descending, it wouldn't be right to drag Eri along. Though she was hiding her identity, she was still a princess. She was already overwhelmed with royal duties, so anyone with any sense would consider her situation. Leah said she was going out with friends for the first time in a while, and taking Reina or Bianca didn't feel right. While it was true that they had grown closer, inviting one of them to tackle a dungeon together still felt a bit distant. Since he had already succeeded in killing Leviathan, the urgency to improve rapport had lessened. This time, Igor is the right choice. It's a dungeon raid, after all. There was no need to overthink it. Since the goal was a dungeon raid, it made sense to bring the most suitable person. In that regard, Igor was an excellent choice. The dungeon we're heading to this time is inside an old mansion near the border between Edenria and the Empire. The dungeon, situated inside an abandoned building, would be filled with formidable monsters and constant battles. Thanks to my training, I don't tire easily, but the best part is that Igor isn't afraid of anything. Most people would be paralyzed with fear at the sight of the incoming hordes, unable to perform to their abilities. But Igor wasn't one of them. Whether or not it was true that he came from the warrior race, Igor didn't get scared unless it was something truly terrifying. Honestly, it's the opposite. Igor might even want to challenge a demon king if he saw one. Ian was confident that Igor was the best choice, which was why he had brought him along. Ian. You didn't bring us to this place for outdoor training, did you? Isn't it nice? The atmosphere is quite something. It was Ian's casual response that allowed him to bring Igor to the dungeon without much worry. Hearing Ian's response, Igor's neck creaked as he turned his head. He couldn't understand what Ian was saying. Huh? Has the meaning of atmosphere changed? Where I'm from, we would have called this place a dump. At first, Igor had been excited when Ian mentioned outdoor training. Vishen was a closed city, befitting a nation of minority tribes, and its people rarely ventured outside unless necessary. Igor was no exception. Training aside, he had never traveled to another town in his life. Coming to the capital for Arc Academy was his first time leaving home. I was looking forward to this. But this. Even Vulcan of territory wasn't bad. Even though it was cold, it offered new experiences. But this seemed a bit too much. Isn't his a ruin? Ian had brought him to a ruin. Hidden deep in the mountains, surrounded by overgrown trees, with vines covering the walls. The windows were shattered, and the decorations were rusted. Were they really going to train here? This isn't the Edenria I imagined. What exactly were you expecting? Where else could you find a place like this? It's spacious and nice, isn't it? Nice? What's nice about it? I was so excited to see the Holy Land. Having never been to Edenria before, Igor had harbored high expectations. A city of saints devoted to God. What would it look like? He imagined bright, serene buildings filled with peace, and people with kind smiles. But Ian had utterly crushed Igor's expectations. This isn't the Holy Land, it's just a ruin. Did we seriously ride a carriage all the way here for this? Though it was large, there wasn't a single intact spot, making it feel like they had ended up in Astalgia instead of the Holy Land. Igor couldn't contain his anger and kept grumbling, but Ian simply looked at him with a gentle smile. He seems really upset. Looking back, it made sense. Igor had spent his entire life in an isolated area and had just started exploring new places. How exciting that must have been. Given how eagerly he sought freedom, it was no wonder he wanted to explore as much as possible. He was even happy to visit the unremarkable Vulcan of territory. If it was the Holy Land of Edenria, he must have had even higher expectations. Edenria, being the sacred ground of the Arisian Church, rarely allowed non-believers or outsiders to visit. So, to come to such a rare place, only to end up in some ruin instead of a bustling center? No wonder he was fuming. He'd have every right to throw a punch. But I needed Igor for this. Ian felt a bit guilty. Though he might lack tact, he wasn't without a conscience, so he had prepared a gift for Igor. As he watched Igor fume, Ian chuckled softly and patted Igor on the shoulder. Igor glared at him, thinking it was a provocation, but then Ian spoke. Once we're done here, I'll make sure you can travel freely wherever you want. What? What nonsense are you spouting now? It's not a joke. This time, I've secured permission from Edenria to travel anywhere as a reward. If we finish this dungeon quickly, you can spend the rest of the time enjoying the city. Really? You know I might exaggerate, but I've never lied, have I? That's true. Igor's eyes lit up instantly. It was true he'd been deceived many times before, but Ian had never been one to go back on his word. The problem was that things usually didn't go as expected, but Ian always kept his promises. This time wouldn't be any different. Igor knew what he had to do. Then let's conquer this dungeon quickly. Igor, now fueled by anticipation rather than anger, marched briskly toward the mansion. If he finished this, he'd get the chance to embark on the trip of his dreams. He couldn't let that opportunity slip away. How long have I waited for this? He remembered vividly the Arisian priests who had visited Vishen during his childhood for proselytizing. At the same time, a dream had taken root in his heart. This is my chance to meet the nuns. He wasn't interested in the rough warrior clans, he wanted to meet kind-hearted, open-minded people. Now that the opportunity to fulfill that dream was right in front of him, he couldn't let it pass by. What are you doing, Ian? We need to hurry if we're going to clear this dungeon. I'm coming. Aren't you being a bit too eager? Eager? This is how I've always been. Igor, now smiling as if his earlier anger was forgotten, pushed through the waist-high grass and headed for the mansion's entrance. Phew. After catching his breath, Igor forcefully pushed open the creaky door, and what he saw made him pause. How does a house end up like this? I'd rather camp outside than stay here. The exterior didn't look ordinary, and the inside is no different. The inside was utterly wrecked, with a musty odor filling the air. The eerie atmosphere made him shiver for a moment, but with his unyielding will, there was no need to be afraid. Let's get going. The sooner we finish this, the sooner we can enjoy our break. Igor, having steeled his resolve, moved forward confidently. But just as he was about to follow, something caught his foot. Swish. Huh? As he took a step forward, he felt something underfoot. Is that paper? What he had stepped on was a piece of paper. In a place he assumed was abandoned, why was there paper scattered on the floor? Curious, Ian stopped Igor and looked at the paper. And at that moment, he understood. These are the safety guidelines for night patrols within the mansion. Under no circumstances should the contents of this document be disclosed to outsiders, and the Flareon family will not be held responsible for any accidents caused by ignoring or violating these instructions. The dungeon's theme is random, so I was wondering what we'd get. Looks like it's a fear debuff dungeon. He had just realized the true nature of the dungeon they were about to enter. Chapter 74, Sealed Demon Sword, 4. Ian knew that the difficulty of the dungeon, based on the Neapolitan ghost story, was undeniably high, and he had no desire to deny it. Just looking at the patterns alone made it clear. You couldn't clear it with brute force alone, you had to use your head, which was already a problem. Of course, someone might say it's no big deal to use your head. But if you can think straight in such a tense situation, then you're a tough guy. If someone tossed you into an abandoned house and said, there are ghosts wandering around, so check the manual and avoid them, it's only natural for your mental state to crack. Moreover, you need a bit of luck to clear it. In summary, the difficulty was considerable, and he had no desire to deny it. However, at least Ian did not harbor fear or lose confidence about tackling the dungeon. Why? The answer was simple. I've been through this a lot. Because I had experience seeing the ending of Heroic Academia. He had experience from seeing the ending of Heroic Academia. To see the ending, he had to clear every type of dungeon, and naturally, he had cleared the dungeons based on ghost stories as well. The courage he had gained from fighting zombies in the Brooker's territory had solved the problem of dealing with abandoned houses and ghosts. Anyway, there are two ways to clear a dungeon based on a Neapolitan ghost story. The first is to avoid areas where a so-called impossible pattern might occur and find the boss. For example, here, that means going in a direction that avoids using stairs. He could smash through the dungeon itself, like breaking through the ceiling, as the first method. The second is to just smash through everything, impossible patterns included, while quickly finding the boss. Luck needs to be on your side, though. Ignoring the manual completely could also be a viable method. No matter how strong they were, if they appeared in this dungeon, weren't they just monsters? He could defeat them all. However, if he broke too many rules, they would grow exponentially stronger, so it was better to quickly find and defeat the boss. The first route involved destroying terrain and the second involved handling monsters swiftly. Ian chose the latter. While the first route is safer, it's not really practical here. As seen in the manual, the method to break the patterns of the Flareon Mansion dungeon mostly involved reducing noise. But if you were destroying the terrain, wouldn't that naturally create noise? If I break through and end up meeting someone in a hood, I'll immediately trigger the pattern. To avoid such mishaps, it was better to choose the second route, even if it was less safe. If I didn't know anything at all, it would be different. But there are ways to find the boss. Ian thought of the demon sword on his back. Though he couldn't wield it due to the seal and the blade's hatred, using its abilities was still possible. Reborn will activate its ability as soon as it detects an enemy nearby. It had the power to analyze enemy and his combat strength, and if it concluded that he was at a disadvantage, it would grant him a powerful buff. While the boss of this dungeon might not be strong, he could detect the activation of the ability whether it was an advantage or disadvantage, so finding it should be easy. The Flareon Mansion dungeon has 3 floors from the basement with the management office. It's spacious, but it won't take too long if I run at full speed. The plan was already complete. The only remaining issue was Igor. He was known for his reckless and fearless behavior, so he probably wouldn't be scared by seeing ghosts. But then again, you never know with people. Well, he could be surprisingly fearful. The possibility had to be kept open. Ian didn't forget that. As he turned his head to check Igor's condition, he suddenly heard a scream. Help, help me. Huh? Hey Ian, did you hear that? What's this? I hear someone screaming. Igor's frown as he looked towards the direction of the scream was evident. It was the moment number 7, the pattern involving screaming humans, began. But the problem didn't end there. From afar, something cloaked in a robe began to approach. The simultaneous occurrence of patterns 6 and 7. At that moment, Ian's eyes widened. An impossible pattern right from the start? According to the manual, for pattern 7, you should lie down and reduce noise. But for pattern 6, you should keep moving and not stay in one place. In a life-threatening moment, Ian quickly thought. Given this situation, one side has to be broken. I should leave that woman and search for the other side. Having made his decision, Ian tried to call Igor. Unfortunately, the woman was already approaching. Igor, who seemed frozen, appeared to be paralyzed by fear. At that moment, a voice from the cloaked woman drifted through, as if her soul was escaping. Why are you standing in front of me? It's a scream, but it has a refined, deep voice. She must be at least 13 years older. Perfect as a bride. Can't you hear me? I don't know who you are, but it's best if you just keep moving. I'm quite busy looking for someone. And clean yourself up, even if you're vagrant, have some dignity as a human. Ha. Really? As Igor waved his hand dismissively, the ghost's demeanor shifted. Although her expression was hidden by the robe, she was clearly furious. At the same time, a chilling statement flowed from the ghost. Hey. Don't you know? I know the people you're looking for. If that's true, it would save me some trouble. But what's this? You will never find that woman. Do you know why? Because I told you not to open your mouth because it stinks, didn't I? And you said I couldn't find her? Then I'll beat you until you spill everything. What? In an instant, the ghost's expression turned to one of bewilderment. What kind of person was this? He had seen countless people who tried to sneak past in silence. He had seen people trembling and running desperately countless times, but what on earth was this person? There were sometimes people who babbled without knowing their place, but that was as far as it went. Most would shrink back at the slightest hint of aggression. But this person was different. Come here. I'll twist your neck. Gah. The intensity in his eyes as he charged was unmistakable. An endless abyss of madness and thoughts unreadable. Ah. It was genuine. He was a madman who intended to beat the ghost into submission. This was no time to be dawdling. The decision to flee immediately was made, but... Sabaku. Ka. What is this? Let go. Let go, I said. Do you want to live? Then tell me. Where have you hidden her? I need to be released first. Igor had already grabbed her from the back with terrifying speed. With his forearm and biceps pinching like pincers, he applied intense pressure to her neck. The ghost's cries of pain emerged. Seeing this, Ian let out a derisive laugh. I was worried about all sorts of things. It was the moment he realized Igor was crazier than he could have imagined. Has he taken care of it? It's a pity we didn't extract any information. Despite the ghost's valiant resistance, it was no match for Igor, who was like a runaway train with a broken handle. The ghost was left in a pitiful state, with a shattered neck. Under Igor's choke, the ghost lost consciousness and began to dissipate. Ian approached, watching the ghost being swept away by the wind. Sabaku, huh? Why use such a name instead of just saying choke? Didn't you tell me and now you're flaunting it? I'm pretty sure I said it was just a joke back then. Sabaku, despite its grand-sounding name, was essentially nothing special. It's just a rear choke. If I had known it would end up like this, I should have just told you it was a choke from the start. Iri, who was recently learning Jiu-Jitsu, Ian had shared a few techniques with her when she begged for useful ones. At that time, he had jokingly called the basic technique a sabaku. Even though he had corrected it, Igor seemed to have taken quite a liking to the name. For a moment, Ian considered pointing out the correct technique name, but it didn't seem necessary. If he likes it, what does it matter? Whether it's a rear choke or sabaku, what difference would it make? No one in this world would know that technique anyway. He probably wouldn't think it odd if the name of the technique changed. He would just deal with it. Deciding it wasn't worth worrying about, Ian turned his head. Still, I didn't expect to defeat it with just a choke. Ian stared intently at the spot where the ghost had vanished. He still couldn't understand how it had happened. Was it really possible to kill with just a simple choke without using mana? Even though it was a ghost, as a dungeon monster, it should have been capable of dying after taking a certain amount of damage. What Igor had used was simply a rear choke. It wasn't an attack infused with mana but pure physical force. And it worked on a ghost? It wasn't even a human, but something already dead that didn't need to breathe. Just how much had Igor leveled up during the break to reach the point where he could kill a monster with just a rear choke? Could it be that Igor has a talent for divine power? The idea crossed his mind briefly. There were indeed people with such traits. Some had a latent attribute that was so weak it went unnoticed, or they didn't even bother to investigate because they thought it was impossible from the start. Igor might be one of those cases. In the original, he was an additional random enemy, not a playable character, so there was no specific information about him. His personality fits dark attribute better than the holy attribute. But attributes are innate, so it's hard to say. Divine power grants beings the ability to inflict severe damage on demons or monsters. If he possessed a sufficient amount of it, it would indeed be possible. Maybe it was something to look into at some point? That thought crossed his mind. Ah. Maybe it's because I'm marked, but this hurts like hell. Whoosh. What's that? Huh? Why are you staring so intensely at my pendant, Ian? Igor pulled out a pendant he had hidden in his clothes. It was a pendant with an old-fashioned design that seemed out of place for him. It had a white base adorned with gold and featured a hinge in the center, presumably for inserting a picture. Of course, it wasn't unusual for Igor to wear a pendant. It wasn't even noteworthy if he wore a wedding ring. The real problem was that Ian recognized the pendant. That's an item worn by high-ranking members of the Aizen Church. Why does he have it? Chapter 75, Sealed Demon Sword, 5. Is it really necessary for the Saintess to be in the hero party? The question was whether it was right to include the Saintess, who was not particularly strong in combat and had merely received a divine oracle from Eris, in the hero party. It was not entirely strange to think this way. After all, the hero party is a place where monsters gather. Ilian Sigurd has reached the pinnacle of elves through centuries of training, and Magiclan can be considered the guild master of the empire. If the party were to include a saintess simply because she had received a divine oracle, it would be hard to understand, given the combination of such extraordinary individuals that made people think, wow, those people are insane. However, Ian did not share that view. But if you knew the true power of the saintess, you would never say such things. It was true that the saintess did not have exceptional combat power. That was an undeniable fact. But the saintess had extraordinary talents in other areas. She can imbue divine power. Enchantment, that is. Enchantment. Originally, it meant adding mana with a certain attribute to an object. But the saintesses who received Eris's oracle could enchant divine power. You might think that anyone with the holy attribute could do this, but that's not the case. The saintess can enchant targets without limitation. It was a mad skill that allowed the saintess to imbue divine attributes not just to weapons and terrain but even to other people's skills. That was the true value of the saintess. Isn't it impressive when you think about it simply? Even without that, what would happen if the holy attribute was further amplified by the support of the saintess? What if the power of Elysian, which is already powerful against demons, was further amplified by the holy attribute? Even Ariel, who is just an expert, could deal damage that would surpass even a master for that moment, making the saintess an indispensable member of the party. Seriously questioning the necessity of a saintess in the party was foolish. She was not just a healer. Her main role was enchantment, but she also took on the additional responsibility of healing party members. Just look at Glendia. How much divine power did she have left to not only enchant party members' equipment but also to create holy water by enchanting ordinary water? As Ian recalled this, he let out a wry smile. The reason for his thoughts was simple. I remember that pendant is something only high-ranking figures of the Aizen Church possess, right? Upon closer inspection, it seems to have a symbol indicating the saintess. It was curious that Igor, who seemed far removed from divine power, was wearing an item belonging to the saintess. If that was truly a saintess's item, it would not be strange if it could kill a ghost with just a simple choke. It must be that the pendant's divine power reacted due to the choke. The mystery of why the ghost was killed had been resolved. Now the question was why Igor had it. There seemed to be no need to ask directly. Curious about this? I received this pendant from a saintess who came to preach in Visan when I was young. Igor started explaining first. When the pendant was opened, the face of a woman standing next to young Igor came into view. I had been injured a lot due to excessive training and once fainted in the forest. The saintess, who was out for a walk at that time, healed me. Afterwards, she gave me this to keep me safe, saying it would protect me in times of danger. Igor carefully handled the pendant as if it were a precious item. It must indeed be important, considering it was a memory of someone who helped him in his youth. More importantly, it was a gift from the saintess. Although I don't know her face well, it's likely from the saintess before Glendia. Igor might be wearing it simply as a talisman. But it wasn't just that. Being an item worn directly by the saintess and high-ranking Aizen priests, it likely had its own protective features. It was probably covered with buffs that the saintess herself had applied. Then, could Igor's extraordinary recovery be due to that? It wasn't certain since the item was from someone other than Glendia. In Glendia's case, she carried various buffs for safety, as well as buffs for physical and mental recovery. If the same kind of buffs were applied, it could explain why Igor was so intensely focused on training. Anyway, I should stop thinking about the pendant here. With the dungeon exploration still ongoing, there was no room for relaxation. Having already missed 2 patterns, it would be best to finish within 10. The next course of action was clear. Let's move. Keep up. Okay. Let's go. Ian sprang into action, with Igor following closely behind. The moment Ian made the decision, he and Igor tore through the mansion like a storm. Move aside. Before I kill you. Gah. It didn't matter if there were people screaming or if doors that shouldn't be open were found open. They pushed through without caring about patterns. Fortunately, within 3 minutes, they had managed to scour from the 1st to the 3rd floors, covering every part of the mansion. Though there were occasionally monsters desperately trying to block their way, they didn't pay them much attention. Break your backs in half. Crack. Whether they were ghosts or anything else, Igor's powerful strength bent their backs like bows. Ian, charging forward with the force of a rampaging tank, came to a stop at the right wall on the third floor. Ian stood there, staring at the wall, causing Igor to express his confusion. Hey Ian. So where exactly is the boss? It seems like we've searched almost every possible place. It was no exaggeration to say they had searched every corner from the first to the third floors. Not just wandering through corridors, but also releasing mana to smash through locked doors. However, what Igor had seen so far were only monsters, with no sign of the boss. Even though they had searched every possible spot, the boss was nowhere to be found. Ian had suddenly stopped in front of the wall. He had touched and knocked on it, suspecting there might be some mechanism, but it was just an ordinary wall. What on earth is here? Igor tilted his head in confusion. But Ian's thoughts were different. It's definitely here. He was certain that this was not an ordinary wall. Otherwise, Reborn wouldn't be reacting. Enemies detected nearby. If you release the seal, you can gain a bonus based on combat power. Even if it was sealed, Reborn's ability could still activate. The activation of the ability meant that a boss monster was present nearby. Of course, it was understandable that Igor found this puzzling. From an outsider's perspective, it might seem like Ian was just staring at a wall. But there was a hidden secret here. This is it. I'm sure of it. No matter how you look at it, it's just a wall. Is there a hidden space or something? That's not it. This is an ordinary wall. Then why are you so sure it's here? Igor, did you happen to see a management room while we were wandering around? Management room? Now that you mention it. Ian's question made Igor pause. Indeed, amidst their search, he hadn't seen a management room. Of course, it was possible he hadn't seen it because the mansion's layout, attached to the rules of conduct, indicated that the management room was underground. If that were the case, it would make sense to find a way down to the underground. Now that I think about it, why wasn't there even a way to go underground? It's simple. The management room was designed to be inaccessible from the start. According to the manual, if ghosts were spotted or anomalies occurred, it instructed to stop patrol and head to the management room. But most people would only know that there is a management room but wouldn't know how to get there. Because they're only focused on avoiding the current situation. In other words, the management room was an illusion. It was like tempting a person dying of thirst in the desert with the promise of an oasis just a little further. Making them think there was a glimmer of hope. Intruders who saw ghosts would only think about going to the management room, their judgment clouded. And this was intended to induce them into falling into the pattern again. For example, they might just think about going to the management room after passing by a ghost in the hallway, blindly using the stairs. What would happen then? No matter how far they went down, they would fall into the pattern of returning to the starting point. Of course, they might be told to wait in place and wait for the maids, but this is a haunted house. Even if morning comes, the maids won't come to open the windows. At the moment of following this, rather than salvation, one would slowly die. As time passed, monsters would become stronger, and if one acted impulsively to escape, they would soon fall into the pattern and lose their life. There was no safe zone in this dungeon to begin with. That was the reason. The boss must be in the management room. It was certain that the source of all evil was located there. When the boss fell, the dungeon would disappear. So wouldn't it make sense for it to be hiding in the safest place? A location that could never be reached by normal means. They wouldn't leave such a place unguarded. Even though Ian had pinpointed the location, Igor's doubts weren't completely resolved. Then why came here? Is there a hidden passage or something? Exactly. A passage. Huh? A hidden passage? It had looked like an ordinary wall. What exactly is here? Was he supposed to start punching the wall or something? Just then. Step back for a moment. Pushing Igor aside, Ian stepped forward, placing his hand on the wall and began to infuse mana into it. The dark mana flowed from his hand and spread across the wall, eventually covering one side completely. Whoosh. Ah. Suddenly a portal. The wall distorted, revealing a hidden portal. Ian had used mana to erase the illusion that had been overlaid on the wall. Seeing Igor's mouth drop open in surprise, Ian smiled. If we go through this, we should be able to reach the management room. The boss's level shouldn't be too high, but be prepared for an immediate battle. Got it. Although Igor seemed to have many more questions, he didn't ask any at that moment. He understood that it was better to save his questions for after they had cleared the dungeon. As Ian and Igor prepared to jump into the portal, they saw a figure trembling in fear. How did you find the location of the portal? It was Fleta, unable to hide her shock. At that moment, Ian muttered to himself. Ether. It was time to clear everything in this dungeon.